Am I the asshole for outing a man as a pedophile in front of his new wife after he made a comment about my miscarriage? So, this is going to be long, and I will try to include the details as best I can. This happened a month ago, and it's still echoing in my head. Editing to add a few things, though this will be the last update, as, for the most part, a lot of you have been very helpful in helping me see things differently. Of course, there are people who say this is fake, but this is Reddit, so I guess that's to be expected, considering I'm a total stranger and this whole thing is ridiculous. I myself haven't posted this type of thing before, so I wasn't sure how much or what all to include. If people really think I'm messed up enough to spin a story like this, I won't argue. I myself am on the spectrum. My brain constantly replays stressful incidents in my head. Unfortunately, my relationship with Mitch was not the first toxic abusive relationship, but luckily, it was my last. In my state, the registry has offenders listed in alphabetical order of last name. I was scrolling through it to find Mitch after my father came to my house and spoke with me in front of Mitch about what he had found. My father watched him pack and leave while I went to my mother's house. That's when I found Sean's mugshot, as they have to update pictures frequently. The person who said, there was an easier way to go about it, wasn't a friend of mine but a mutual acquaintance of my brother's. I was at his house talking about the ordeal when this mutual made that comment. The conversation ended and the whole mood of the dinner party we were at shifted. This is the last I'll be adding or replying, as I'm currently 16 weeks pregnant with my rainbow baby, and I refuse to let this shitty situation drag me down. Thanks to everyone who helped relieve the stress it was causing. I just want to take this time to focus on my baby girl. I'm sorry if the way I worded anything caused any misunderstandings, but I know what happened, and I'm glad I told her. The family member who was my grapevine knew the woman's cousin and asked me this morning if she could give her my number, to which I agreed. I look forward to talking to her on a better note and meeting her daughters, Kayla, 24, and Arya, 20. When I, 26F, was 21, I was in an abusive and toxic relationship with a man we'll call Mitch, fake name, 35M at the time. Mitch was friends with this guy, who we'll call Sean, fake name, 38 at the time, and a recovering alcoholic. Sean always gave me bad vibes. I had known that Mitch met Sean in jail, but I never pried about why he was there. Mitch told me that he himself was in jail for a bar fight. I was naive and believed him. A few months into the relationship, I got pregnant but ultimately lost the baby. It was around this time that my parents started hearing rumors about Mitch. They asked me for his birthday and full name, and it turns out he was a registered sex offender and did time for child pornography. I left him immediately and even looked at the registry myself. Not much of a surprise that I found Sean listed, mugshot and all, also for minor related incidents. I have since moved on and am happily married in a completely different county. Last week, my husband and I were visiting family in my hometown when we came across Sean in a store. We did our best to avoid him, yet he walked right up to me and my husband while we were at checkout and had the nerve to ask me, "Where's the kid?" Knowing damn well I had a miscarriage all those years ago. I saw red. At that moment, I realized he was there with a woman, who was with two special needs adults, both female. I saw the rings and I asked her, how could you trust a man like that around them? Because it was very clear that both were nonverbal, as they could barely even call her mom. Sean immediately got tense, and his wife asked me what I meant. So I told her. This resulted in her Googling the registry and proceeding to walk out of the store with her daughters in tow. Luckily, my husband stepped in before Sean could say anything else. I've heard through the grapevine that she has started divorce proceedings and now Sean has started drinking again. I brought this up with someone, and they said there were better ways to go about this than how it happened, but I don't know. I just need an outside opinion. I hope this helps. Now to the next story, story 2. My brother-in-law secretly peed on my stuff for months and what I discovered unveiled a family history that shattered my marriage. My husband, Ted, who is 34 years old, and I, now 29, have been together for a decade. We first met in college and dated all throughout our time there. After I graduated, I decided to take a semester off to travel while Ted finished his degree so that we could move to another state together. However, he had to retake some classes, which delayed our plans. When I returned from my travels, we still couldn't move, so I ended up moving in with him and his brother Ash, who is 32 years old, while Ted completed his studies. Before moving in, I made sure that Ted got Ash's approval for me to bring my male cat along. Although they had an old dog, Ash assured me it would be fine. About 3 weeks after moving in, I began to notice a strong smell of urine in our bedroom. Despite our efforts, we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. My cat is toilet trained, so I was certain he wasn't the culprit, and the dog couldn't access our room since it was on the second floor and he had hip problems. Eventually, I started finding my clothes on the floor reeking of urine. I asked Ted about it, but he was just as puzzled as I was. After 3 frustrating months of this happening about twice a week, I finally asked Ash if he had been bringing the dog upstairs. He denied it, which only added to my frustration. I took extra care not to leave any clothes lying around, but the pee continued to show up in my shoes, on my throw pillows, and other belongings. One day, after I broke down in frustration, Ash suggested that it might be my cat marking his territory, as male cats are sometimes known to do, especially in new environments. He said it made sense because it was only my things that were being targeted. If you have cats, you know that the smell of cat urine is distinct from that of human urine, and I trusted my cat completely. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I set up a camera in our room. I was paying rent and Ted was aware of the camera, so I figured this was the best way to find out what was really going on. To my shock, the footage revealed that Ash had been entering our room and urinating on my belongings. After discovering this, I immediately packed my things, took my cat, and moved in with a friend until Ted finished his studies and we could finally relocate. I chose not to confront Ash directly because, honestly, the situation was just too disgusting. So Ted handled it. Since then, I've barely spoken to Ash. Although he was the best man at our wedding, we have made a point to avoid each other during family gatherings. When the pandemic hit, Ash lost both his job and his apartment, leaving him in a difficult financial situation. He reached out to ask if he could move in with us, but I was strongly opposed to the idea, given that he had previously peed on my possessions. At the time of the incident, he was 25 years old, a fully grown adult. Now his entire family has been calling and texting me, accusing me of being heartless for leaving him homeless during a pandemic. But it wasn't their belongings that were being defiled. Am I wrong to hold a grudge because of what he did? He is on the verge of losing his home, and his cat deserves a place to live, but it has been made clear that I can't just take in his cat and leave him out in the cold. I feel justified in my decision, but Ted has now said that he can't abandon his brother, especially since the job market here is better suited to Ash's profession. Edit 1. Thank you all for taking the time to read about my current dilemma. I'm currently at work, so I had to pause responding for a while, but I will make sure to get back to everyone in the morning. There have been a few recurring questions that I'd like to address. One of the most common is whether Ash is in therapy. The last I checked, he was. After the incident, his mother insisted that he see a therapist, and that's how we discovered the underlying reason for his behavior. Ash and Ted had been best friends, and when I entered Ted's life, Ash perceived me as a threat to their relationship, which led him to try and break us up. Of course, this didn't work and instead resulted in Ted cutting off contact with Ash for a period. According to my mother-in-law, Ash's therapist suggested that he needed to make amends with his brother, which is why she eventually reconnected them and sought forgiveness for Ash's actions. They reconciled, and as long as I didn't have to interact with Ash or have him in our home, I was willing to tolerate it. Some of you also asked why Ash was involved in our wedding. When we were planning our wedding, the celebration was primarily for our parents. We would have been content with a courthouse ceremony, but my parents wanted a big wedding since I'm the first of my sisters to get married. All of my sisters and all of Ted's brothers were included as bridesmaids and groomsmen, so excluding Ash wasn't really an option. Given that Ted and Ash are best friends, I agreed to his involvement as long as I didn't have to take photos with him or have him give a speech, which was fine by me. Why aren't any of his family members able to provide him with a place to stay? The rest of the family resides on the West Coast, while we live on the East Coast. It seems that there is a discrepancy between what I have been told and what I have read in the comments regarding the demand for Ted's profession. It appears that his line of work is more sought after on the East Coast compared to the West. If he were to relocate, it is possible that his prospects of securing a job in his chosen industry may diminish. I am currently working on persuading all of his brothers, there are 8 of them, to contribute a bit so that, together, we can ensure Ash can continue to stay where he is. Why do they think I'm in the wrong? His entire family has a strong forgive and forget mentality. They have forgiven actions that I find completely unacceptable, such as stealing cars, faking a college degree, and keeping the money, among other things. They genuinely believe that Ash's behavior was a one-time incident and that he has since outgrown it. From their perspective, I should just move past it. Did he ever apologize? Ash did apologize to Ted, but he never extended that apology to me, which I'm admittedly still bitter about. I had considered accepting an apology, but after reading your comments, I realized that doing so would likely just be a way for him to ease his way back into my life, possibly leading to more trauma. I want to clarify that I'm not trying to make light of the situation. I just couldn't resist making that connection. Did he compensate me for the items he ruined? Since I didn't initially know the source of the pee, I simply kept washing the affected items. After discovering the truth, I threw away everything that had been peed on, as long as it didn't hold sentimental value. However, I still have 2 pairs of shoes in my home that were unfortunately subjected to his golden showers. He didn't offer to replace or pay for the items I discarded, and honestly, it never crossed my mind to ask him to do so. At this point, should I just accept the loss and move on? What is your husband's perspective on this? Ted is an exceptional individual, who graciously tolerates my antics to the point where I would genuinely consider allowing Ash to reside with us if it brought Ted joy. After the incident, Ted was deeply affected and decided to end all communication with Ash. However, when Ted's mom suggested that therapy could assist Ash in making amends, they eventually reconciled. Ted has always respected my choices and has never pressured me to spend time with Ash or have him over at our place. When we got married, he assured me that I had the freedom to choose whether or not Ash would be the best man. However, because I care deeply for him, I am willing to tolerate Ash's presence during important occasions like Christmas and other significant family events. May I have access to the video? I regret to inform you that I cannot fulfill your request. Although I may have strong feelings towards the man, I strongly value the importance of privacy. When it happened, I only shared it with Ted to ensure he would trust my account. Frankly, I would have been skeptical if he had told me that one of my sisters was urinating in his belongings. From what I understand, he has only shared it with his parents to validate our claims, as well as a couple of his older brothers who were naturally curious. I would like to express my gratitude for the recognition I have received through these awards. They are absolutely beautiful and have a way of making me feel like a champion. You all are truly exceptional. I would like to express my gratitude for the fantastic jokes and nicknames you provided. If I don't win this battle and Ash ends up moving here, I'll make sure to leave him a litter box and puppy training pads in the guest room. It'll be a subtle reminder of the situation. We appreciate your kind words and assure you that we will continue to respond to comments and messages promptly. Edit 2, Mini Update. Today has been absolutely awful, as things have escalated within the family. Some of the other brothers stumbled upon this post and your comments. It turns out the family didn't have the full story, and apparently, neither did some of our brothers. Brothers 3, 4, and 8 are now on their way here to help because I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. I want to send a huge thank you to those who sent messages suggesting that I somehow deserved what happened, or that I brought it upon myself. I sincerely hope that the P-Man visits you and decides to use your toothbrush as his target. On a more serious note, I deeply appreciate the concern, the kind comments, the reality checks, and the insights that have helped me recognize my own shortcomings. Things are tough right now, but I hope to provide you all with some closure or at least more answers in a few days. Don't forget to stay hydrated. Update 1. After reading your suggestions, I decided to show Ted the post. Upon reading some of the comments, Ted came to understand that he had failed me by not addressing the situation more firmly when it first happened. Even though I had been somewhat okay with it at the time, he now realizes that the way he, his family, and his brother handled everything was completely inappropriate. Ted offered a heartfelt apology for not demanding more accountability from himself, his family, and his brother back then. He assured me that Ash moving in with us is absolutely not going to happen. As an engineer, Ted reached out to some professional contacts to inquire about job opportunities for Ash. One of these contacts happened to work for the same company where Ash had been employed and revealed that Ash hadn't actually been fired. He had quit. The contact also mentioned that Ash is welcome to return to his previous position if he wants it. Ted confronted Ash with this new information. We live a couple of hours away from Ted's family. While I was at work, I currently hold 2 jobs, one at night from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., and another part-time during the day because it brings me joy. Not because Ted isn't providing enough. Ted uncovered some things that set off a chain reaction of events and revelations. To be honest, rather than feeling angry, I just feel an overwhelming sadness. I realize that I might be coming across as weak when I should be outraged, but at this point, I'm simply exhausted and all I want is to sleep. Still, I've received enough supportive and critical messages that I felt I owed everyone some closure. I'm probably going to receive backlash for sharing all of this, but at this moment, I don't really care. What follows is a condensed, yet still lengthy version of everything that has happened since my original post. To clarify, when I refer to each of Ted's brothers, I'll use B followed by their respective number. If I mention a wife, it's in reference to the brother's spouse, not implying that any of them have multiple wives. First there's B1, who is a doctor with a military background. He's married and has 3 children. Next is B2, a surgeon who shares his home with his wife, 2 dogs, and a bearded dragon. B3 is an engineer, currently engaged, and owns a dog. Following him is B4, a teacher and researcher, who is married and has one child. Then, there's B5, who works in IT. I'm not too familiar with the details of his life, but he's also married. B6 is another doctor, though he is single and actively dating. B7 is a chef and businessman, married with one child. Meanwhile, B8 works in car sales and has a wife, 3 kids, and some fish. Of course there's Ted, B9, who is my husband, and we have a cat together. Lastly, B10 is Ash, who has been the center of all this drama. After everything came to light, I sat down with Ted to have a serious conversation about all the points you all had raised. Ted was incredibly apologetic, and we both ended up crying together as we vowed to do better and be better. As you might have gathered by now, his family dynamic is quite complicated, and Ted has been deeply conditioned not to rock the boat. We mutually agreed to seek individual therapy, and if our therapist recommend it, we will also pursue couples therapy. To lift my spirits, Ted even ordered me a t-shirt that says the most okayest human in the universe. Through all of this, we've realized that there's a lot of healing we both need to do and we're committed to working on it together. Ted eventually decided to call some of his connections to get to the bottom of things and discovered that Ash hadn't quit his job as he claimed. Ted was furious about all the drama this situation had caused, so he went to confront Ash directly. When Ted arrived at Ash's place, Ash wasn't there. Since Ted had a key for emergencies, he let himself in and waited for Ash to return. After a while, Ted needed to use the bathroom, but the guest bathroom was locked. He went into Ash's room to use that bathroom instead, and that's when he stumbled upon what he later described to me as a situation. Ted immediately called me and urged me to stay home, explaining that he needed to involve his family and didn't want to expose me to any more stress than I had already endured. His words made me fear the worst, but all I could do was ask him to come back soon and be careful. About 2 hours later, I received a call from the wife of the 8th brother, who was in tears, asking if I was okay. I reassured her that I was fine, even though Ted had only given me a vague explanation of what was going on, and I hadn't heard anything further since then. She asked if I wanted to know the full story, and of course I did. She began by apologizing, explaining that the family hadn't known the entire situation until now. Apparently, the 5th brother had come across my post online and called the 7th brother to complain about me sharing the story publicly. It seems that having your brother-in-law pee on your belongings isn't so common that the brother immediately recognized our family as the one in the post. As it turned out, the 7th brother read the post and felt that there were some details in my account that didn't quite add up. He reached out to the 2nd brother, who then contacted their mother, and by this point, the entire family had read the post. I had missed calls from both the 6th and 2nd brothers, which I hadn't answered because I was working. As many of you suspected, the part about Ash's therapist was not entirely accurate. It turns out that the therapist Ash had been seeing was actually a friend of his with no formal training. This friend had been pretending to be his therapist just to appease Ash's mother and get her off his back. Ash faked going to therapy, which his mother paid for, over the course of about 3 years. When Ash's mother eventually found out the truth, she decided to keep it a secret, justifying her actions by saying that she had forgiven other brothers for worse behavior in the past. All of this came to light when the 2nd brother confronted their mother about Ash not apologizing to me. They had been operating under the false assumption that Ash had already apologized and that I had forgiven him, likely because of my history of being overly forgiving, and the fact that he was the best man at our wedding. This is why they were so adamant about him moving in with us. They were also unaware that the territorial incidents had been happening for months. They thought it was just a few isolated instances, not the continuous pattern of behavior that it actually was. Back to the wife of the 8th brother. She told me that the 3rd, 4th, and 8th brothers were on their way because Ted had asked for help, which understandably freaked me out. She then suggested I talk to the wife of the 1st brother, as she could use some support. After hanging up, I noticed that Ted had been trying to reach me while I was on the phone. When I finally answered, he kept apologizing, saying that his brothers would handle everything. I was done with the vague explanations, so I told him to just tell me what was going on, explaining that I had just spoken with the wife of the 8th brother and didn't have the patience to be kept in the dark any longer. Ted then revealed to me that Ash has some serious mental issues and harbors a deep hatred for me. Ted discovered pictures of me inside Ash's bathroom cupboard, smeared with pee and, disturbingly, other bodily fluids. Even more horrifying was that Ash also had pictures of the 1st brother's 14-year-old daughter. I have no idea what she could have possibly done to deserve that level of obsession. Ted, disgusted and furious, went into the bedroom and found photo albums in his nightstand that were supposed to be at his parents' house. You can probably guess whose pictures had been cut out and scratched over. The comments about Ash's psychotic behavior were, unfortunately, more accurate than I could have imagined. Ted dropped the albums in disgust when he found our wedding photo, stained with yellow. He then noticed our cat hiding under the bed, frightened and malnourished. When he coaxed her out, he discovered that she was also covered in dried pee and other fluids. At this point, the sixth brother called Ted because I hadn't been answering my phone. Ted told him what he had found, that Ash wasn't home, and that he needed to take the cat to the vet. The sixth brother instructed Ted to stay at the house until they could determine Ash's whereabouts. The brothers started calling each other, and the first brother was so furious that he threatened to kill Ash because of what he did to his daughter, which is why he wasn't one of the brothers who came to help. Now that all of Ted's brothers know what has happened, there are a lot of emotions swirling around, ranging from fury to concern, and they still do not know where Ash is. Ted called his mother to confront her about lying, covering up and reuniting them, although she claims she did not know Ash was lying about the therapist when she orchestrated their reconciliation. She broke down in tears, admitting that she knew the older brothers had tormented Ash when he was young, and she had done nothing to stop it. She feels she failed as a mother and has been trying to protect Ash now to make up for her past mistakes. I do recall that when we got married, my mother-in-law was very attentive to Ash, which I just assumed was her being motherly. Later, Ted told me he also remembers his mother questioning whether it was a good idea to have Ash as the best man, something we both, in our naivety, did not find odd at the time, given that she had always encouraged Ted to be a stabilizing presence in Ash's life. During their confrontation, she told Ted that the more involved he was in Ash's life, the more stable Ash seemed. She said she never told Ted about this because she did not want to burden him, and by the time she realized Ash had been lying about therapy, he appeared to have outgrown his issues and seemed fine. After hanging up with his mother, Ted called me to apologize and explained everything that had just unfolded. I decided to call out of my other job because there is no way I can go to work in this state. I have a lot to process, but I will keep you updated. I called Ted and told him I was on my way over because someone needs to take care of the cat. He tried to dissuade me, saying he did not want me to see everything that was going on, but honestly, I am just worried about the cat. At this point, I feel numb and just want to do something that makes me feel useful. About an hour into my drive, I received a notification from our Ring doorbell, which records anyone who comes to the door. The notification showed a delivery of sunflowers, Ted's favorite flower. He is very secure in his masculinity, so please do not turn this into something it is not. I asked the delivery person to read me the card. With this type of doorbell, you can talk to the person at the door, and it was from Ash. The message said something along the lines of, "You did me wrong by sharing our problems online. Anything that happens as a result will be on you." I broke down at that moment. I had to pull over to the side of the road and just cry my heart out. I called my neighbor, asked them to take the flowers and throw them away, sent Ted a picture and then turned around and drove back to my sister's place because I honestly do not know what to do. I feel completely lost, and this whole situation is so messed up. I had a large family before any of this happened, and now I feel like I have lost so many people I love, people I thought consider me family as well. But not even in my sheltered view of the world can I see or justify any of the things that are happening right now. I do not want to lose my husband. I am worried about the cat, and I am terrified that Ash might hurt himself or my husband. I called Ted's first sister-in-law, and she is incredibly frightened for her daughter's safety. I wish I could offer her some comfort, but I simply do not have the strength right now because I am just as terrified as she is. Rationally, I know that none of this is my fault, but I can't shake the feeling that I am somehow at the center of all the chaos that has unfolded, and I genuinely don't know what to do. I am managing, or at least as well as someone can under these circumstances. I'm staying at my parents' house now, and Ted is here with me and he brought our cat along. Life feels a little less terrible with a cat curled up on your lap. So where do I even begin? By this point, you probably have 1,000 questions, and the truth is, I don't know how to answer any of them. I've been holding off on posting this because I've been waiting to process everything that's happened. Maybe I won't post it at all and leave you all in the dark. This entire situation, along with some of the messages I've received, has shaken my faith in humanity a bit, but perhaps that's just part of what it means to be human. You know what the worst part of all this is? I've developed legitimate PTSD from the whole ordeal, and I no longer say that lightly. Every time I hear someone urinating, the sound of pee hitting the water, I feel this overwhelming sense of dread in my chest, and the world around me starts to feel like it's fading into static. Even going to the bathroom myself has become an ordeal. On a slightly positive note, I did have my first therapy appointment. We live in a world where, unfortunately and fortunately, you can throw money at a problem and find a solution. I'm grateful to my father for stepping in and paying for an emergency therapist. That's a brief update on how I've been doing, since some of you have been asking. But I know the real reason you're all here is to find out what happened to Ash after the flower delivery. So here's what unfolded next. I reached my breaking point and decided to head back to my sister's place. Ted left right away to be with me. Ted's sixth brother is the one taking charge of everything now. Out of all my brothers-in-law, he's my favorite, and honestly, I don't care if the others see this. Most of them have treated me poorly at some point, although none as badly as Ash, who clearly takes the crown. I haven't had the strength to ask what's going to happen to Ash. I believe he needs help more than anything else. Ted's first brother, on the other hand, has a different opinion and is apparently trying to involve the police since his daughter is a minor. I asked Ted to show me the pictures. Ted's second brother advised me to document everything, thinking it might help. Unfortunately, it didn't, it only raised more questions. But I suppose that's something my therapist can help me work through. At this moment, I don't have anything more to say. I'm sorry if this feels like a waste of your time, but I'm sure this isn't the end of it, and I'll have more to share, maybe later, maybe tomorrow. Well, they found Ash. Ted's third, fourth, and eighth brothers arrived at his place, and this time, he was there. Apparently, he hadn't noticed that Ted had been there earlier and had no idea about the storm that was about to hit. Things quickly escalated, punches were thrown, there was a lot of yelling. And after more punches and a trip to the ER, Ash is now under a psychiatric hold, being evaluated for a range of issues. Ted's mom has been trying to reach out, though I'm unsure whether it's to apologize or to find out what's going on since the entire family is furious with her. At this point, I'm done with her. This has been the harshest reality check I could ever imagine, but it has certainly taught me a lot about people, trust, and family. From the information we've gathered, it seems that Ted's mom was right about one thing. Ted not being actively involved in Ash's life may have contributed to this chaos. I suppose the distance we maintained during the pandemic might have triggered his decline. However, Ash will have to work through his issues with whatever coping mechanisms he's provided because Ted has now cut ties with about half of his family. Hopefully, this time, it's for good. Neither of us sees a way to move past this anytime soon. Tragically, Ash's cat didn't survive. That's something I will always carry guilt for. At some point over the past year, the cat developed a kidney problem that went untreated. While she was being abused and neglected, her condition worsened beyond the point of recovery. The vet, after hearing everything, since they had to explain part of the situation to the authorities who were being called to investigate animal abuse, determined that the most humane option was to put her down to prevent further suffering. As for the incident with B1's daughter, it seems to have stemmed from severe bullying Ash experienced from B1 when they were younger. Ash's actions weren't about direct contact with her but rather a twisted form of revenge against B1 in the only way he knew. B1's daughter will be attending therapy, just to be safe. I'm not sure how much they told her, but I assume they had to ask questions about her interactions with Ash, eventually leading to some explanation of the situation. So that's where things stand. I'm not leaving my husband, I'm not engaging in any retaliatory actions, and I'm going to therapy. I've made it abundantly clear to everyone that none of them will ever live with us for any reason. I don't care if they show up with the Pope, I just feel like the part of me that cared is gone. And in the end I never received the apology I was owed, but honestly, I don't want it anymore. Maybe my therapist will convince me otherwise, or maybe it's for the best. For now, I'll just deal with everything as best as I can. I want to start by expressing my deep gratitude for the overwhelming support and kindness I've received from so many strangers online. The messages of concern and encouragement have meant a great deal to me and my family during these difficult times. I plan to start responding to messages soon, but the past few days have been incredibly tough. My therapist suggested writing as a way to organize my thoughts and process everything that has happened. So I thought it might be helpful to share an update for those who have been following this journey, which some of you have dubbed the P-Man saga. It's now been almost 2 weeks since I first confronted the chaos that is my husband's family, and as you all know, it didn't go smoothly. I am deeply thankful to Reddit and everyone here for opening my eyes to issues that desperately needed attention, even though doing so has turned my life upside down. Somehow, people on Twitter also found their way to this story, and I want to extend my thanks to them as well for their support. A lot of questions have been asked repeatedly, so I want to address them as best I can. When it comes to my husband and my brothers-in-law, I simply don't have the emotional capacity to deal with most of them right now, with the exception of brother number 6. He has always been my favorite, and in hindsight, we should have followed his example and distanced ourselves from the rest of the family. He has been genuinely supportive and sincerely apologetic about everything that has happened. I did reach out to brother number 1 and his wife to offer any help I could provide, but they politely declined, saying I had already done enough. I'm not sure if that was meant as a subtle dig or if they were being sincere, but either way, I am keeping my distance from all of them for now. Most of the other brothers have also apologized. Some have taken responsibility for their role in this whole mess, while others have acknowledged their past behaviors that contributed to it. I think it's safe to say that this entire family will be keeping the psychology profession in business for quite some time. I did suggest that everyone should seek therapy because, although I was the one who brought these issues to light, this situation has impacted the family as a whole. I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on healing and processing everything that has happened. While I know this journey is far from over, I'm hopeful that, with time and support, we can all move forward in a healthier way. Some kind Redditors pointed out that my mother-in-law may have been manipulated and abused throughout her life. While I'm not denying or agreeing with that assessment, it's clear that her life has been complicated. As of now, we have decided to go no contact with her indefinitely. The final straw was when she called to berate us for what she perceived as breaking up her family. Her words were harsh, something along the lines of, "I've spent years keeping this family together. I've forgiven every single thing each of you has ever done," she said to my husband. "And this is how you repay me? By letting a little witch destroy our family?" Ted, my husband, is doing his best to handle everything. He's in therapy, working through his feelings, and he keeps apologizing repeatedly. I think seeing the damage his best friend caused because of him will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading through all of your comments together, and while he appreciates the support and understanding from everyone, he feels he hasn't truly earned it. He believes he has a lot to make up for over the coming years. He also told me that he would understand if I wanted a divorce, saying he couldn't live with the fact that his family had caused so much pain. I assured him that I still love him deeply and that none of this is his fault. We'll see how therapy helps him in the long run. As for Ash, he is still in psychiatric care. He requested to see Ted, but that was immediately denied. However, Ash did write a letter to Ted. I don't know what it says, nor do I want to know, but Ted assured me that I would never have to see Ash again. Once it's considered safe, Ash will be moved to the West Coast where the rest of the family can handle his care. We have decided to wash our hands of him completely. Ted's brother, who has been managing Ash's care, agrees that moving him far away from us is the best course of action. While Ted has been discussing the doctor's reports with his brother, I haven't asked for details, and I'm okay with that. Taking a break from everything was something many of you suggested, and we followed through on it. I quit one of my jobs and have been working remotely from my dad's beach condo for the other. Ted took some vacation time, and thankfully, his boss has been very understanding. Even though it's the middle of January and the weather isn't ideal, being near the water has been soothing. It's been a relief to step away from all the craziness. I also got a new phone so that his family can't contact me anymore. Ted, our cat, and I are the only ones enjoying some quiet time together for the next few days. Lastly, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about the 10 brother situation. It seems I may have caused some confusion. What I meant was that there weren't always just 10 sons. This isn't my story to tell, but from what I understand, they used to have 3 sisters. 2 of them passed away when they were young due to health issues. This is why there's a gap between brothers 1 through 8 and then Ted and Ash. The 3rd sister's story is more complicated. She was between brothers 4 and 5. And yes, I'm aware they had many children. They don't believe in contraceptives, even now. I apologize for any confusion. Update 3, Tokyo Drift. Hello everyone, it's been about 2 months since this whole ordeal began, and I've been receiving a lot of messages and comments asking for an update. Most of these messages have been kind and supportive, as always, but of course, there are exceptions. At this point, I've come to accept that such negativity is just part of being on the internet. First, I want to apologize for taking so long to share this update. I know there's been a lot of curiosity about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I needed some time to process everything before I could talk about it. Now that I've had some time, I'm ready to share another unfortunate chapter of this story so that those of you who have been following along can finally have some closure. I also want to extend a welcome to the new readers from Facebook. I appreciate everyone letting me know where they're coming from because I had no idea just how powerful Reddit could be until I made my first TIFU post. So here's what's been happening. Ted asked me for some time apart. He's dealing with a lot of emotional turmoil, and my presence is making things harder for him. He's been carrying a lot of guilt, and confronting all the skeletons in his family's closet has been incredibly overwhelming. While we aren't officially divorced, we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house, so Ted has been staying there while I'm living with my parents. I'm not sure what will happen once the sale is finalized or what Ted wants to do, but I've promised to give him the space he needs. Ted did give me permission to update you all because, despite the occasional hateful messages and comments, Most of you have been incredibly sweet and supportive. I know there's been a lot of confusion about Ted's family tree, especially with the inclusion of his sisters, so I'll do my best to clarify things in this update. Ted's family is quite extensive, and it can be a bit confusing to keep track of everyone. Here's a brief overview of the family members based on what I know. The eldest brother has a military background and works as a doctor. He's married and has 3 kids. The second brother is a surgeon, married as well, with 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. The third brother is an engineer, currently engaged, and has a dog. The fourth brother is a teacher and researcher with a wife and 1 child. Then there's another brother who works in IT. I'm not entirely sure of the details about his life, but he's married. The 6th brother is also a doctor, though he's single and apparently still enjoying the single life. The 7th brother is a chef and businessman. He's married and has 1 child. The 8th brother works in car sales, has a wife, 3 kids, and some fish. Finally, there's Ted, who is my husband, or might be ex-husband, and we have a cat. And of course, there's Ash, who is the youngest. I should mention that there were 3 sisters who were born before Ted, but they passed away before he was even conceived. Since Ted has never had any memories of them or even knew them, he has always referred to himself as having only brothers. This is why I didn't initially mention the sisters when talking about his family. It's not that I'm trying to dismiss them, it's just that, in Ted's experience, they were never a part of his life, and he's always spoken of his family in terms of his brothers. You all have some wild imaginations. The theories you've come up with range from entirely plausible to completely outlandish, but I suppose that's to be expected, given the circumstances. It seems insanity might run in the family after all. First off, no, the sisters weren't all murdered. Sisters 2 and 3 were twins who sadly passed away due to a birth defect. I misspoke when I mentioned something genetic earlier. For some reason, many of you assumed it was something specific to women, but their condition was related to underdeveloped lungs or something along those lines. That's all Ted knows, and as you're aware, I'm not exactly in a position to ask his family for more details. The twins died just a few weeks after being born, while still in the hospital, so there's no chance any of the brothers were involved in their deaths. As for the first sister, she tragically died in a motorcycle accident when one of the brothers was driving while intoxicated and underage. Why didn't I share this information up front? Because it's not my business or yours, and it wasn't relevant to the situation we're dealing with now. I also believe people deserve some level of privacy, even in the midst of all this. You can choose whichever brother best fits your story. And no, I won't tell you which one was in the accident. Many of you have been curious about the dirty secrets that their mother forgave them for. I'll share the ones I know and have permission to reveal, but I won't be naming which brother did what, except for brother 7, since I've already shared his story, and there's no point in hiding it now. I'm just going to copy and paste the comment I made earlier. There are 10 brothers in total. Brothers 1 through 4 were your stereotypical golden child, straight A students, setting the bar high for the younger ones. As a result, brothers 5 and younger were always under pressure to live up to the expectations set by the eldest 4. It was expected that all of them would excel in sports, maintain good grades, secure a college scholarship, because paying for 10 kids' college education isn't easy, and ultimately have a successful career. Brother 7, however, didn't want to follow that path. He's an incredibly smart guy, but he found it unfair that his life was dictated by this constant competition with his older brothers. So when he graduated high school, he told his parents he was going to study abroad to become a chef. He claimed that his scholarship would only cover part of the tuition, with no funding for room and board. His parents, proud of the idea that their son was studying abroad to become a renowned international chef, agreed to support him as long as he kept up his grades and cooked his signature dishes during holidays and family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York City with 4 roommates and faked his international life. Brother 7 isn't one to use social media much, so he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. He just had to make sure to call his parents at hours that aligned with the supposed time difference, and since this was before the era of advanced technology, he didn't have to worry about video calls. He simply spun some really good stories to share during the holidays. Meanwhile, he kept the money his parents sent for tuition and room and board and invested it in something that ended up making him a lot of money. Eventually, he moved back to the West Coast and claimed he was managing restaurants. The truth came out when one of the oldest brother's daughters expressed interest in attending the same school brother 7 supposedly went to and asked if he could take her there to show her around. By that time, he had made enough money that the fallout wasn't too severe, but he's still the one who cooks Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners because, in reality, he's quite a good cook. So here's what I know from what Ted, their mom, or the brother involved has told me about the things they've done without facing any real consequences from their parents. One brother was responsible for stealing and totaling not just one but two cars, both times getting away with it. Another brother also stole a car, though without the same destructive results. Then there was the time one of them left their grandmother alone for an entire week when they were supposed to be taking care of her. There were also instances of theft, not just from outside sources but from within the family, where they stole and sold things belonging to other brothers or from the house. Physical altercations seemed to be a recurring theme, with some fights ending with the police getting involved and others not requiring legal intervention but still resulting in trips to the hospital. Skipping school events like the senior trip and pocketing the money was another thing that went unpunished. Public misbehavior was also part of the mix, including incidents of public nudity, public indecency and, perhaps unsurprisingly given the family history, public urination. The list doesn't end there. There was even a stalking incident that led to a restraining order being filed. On top of that, there was plenty of underage drinking and driving under the influence. Despite all these behaviors, their parents never really held them accountable, and everything was brushed under the rug, much like everything else in that family. Where is the dad? Well, the last time I saw him, he was in an urn in the living room of their mom's house, so I assume he's still there. Growing up, he was an incredibly misogynistic and abusive father and husband. While he was a decent grandfather to his grandkids, that's a perspective better left to them if you want to discuss it. Why would anyone expose their children to such a horrible human being? I don't have children of my own, but Ted's parents were, and his mom still is, very traditional. To them, appearances are everything. Having a perfect family with prideful sons and beautiful daughters was all they ever wanted. I'm not justifying anything, but the loss of their daughters had a significant impact on them and the entire family. Why did they have more kids after everything that happened? They desperately wanted another daughter and tried 2 more times before they were unable to have any more children. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the inability to have more children only made things worse for them. What happened to Ash? I honestly don't know. I'd like to say I don't care, but the truth is, from a human standpoint, I do care. After going through therapy, I've developed a bit more empathy and I understand that he is sick. So yes, I care and hope he is okay and that he's able to heal and move forward. I just wish for all of that to happen very, very far away from me. I don't know if he's still institutionalized or not, but I do have it on good authority that he's staying far away from me and that's all that matters regarding that family. A shout out to my brother-in-law who is a doctor and single for being great as always. He has been very supportive throughout everything and in general, he's a good guy. And yes, he's still single and ready to mingle if anyone is interested. He made me emphasize that when I told him I was updating again. So, if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a cute doctor with a crazy messed up family, he's your guy. Tortilla the cat has been soaking up all the love, affection, and praise. I'm sorry for not paying the cat tax, as I mentioned in a previous comment, but right now, I'm not comfortable sharing pictures of anything, including Tortilla, with anyone. It's nothing personal. I'm just feeling insecure after everything that's happened, and I hope you understand. So I apologize for that. Since I'm avoiding the tax, I'll at least tell you she's a black cat. She got her name, Tortilla, because the first time I made Ted tacos, I completely forgot the tortillas were in the oven, and they ended up charred to a crisp. As for me, well, things suck right now, and they'll probably continue to suck for a while. But that's just life. I had to quit my job after already quitting my other one, so I'm currently unemployed and staying at my parents' house. But my dad has been incredibly understanding and just wants me to be okay, and I love him for that. It's been nice having my sisters around, and there are even more cats here to keep Tortilla company. I'm still in therapy, which seems to be all I can manage right now. On the bright side, I'm sure none of these cats have ever been brushed as much as they have in the past few weeks, so they're all extra shiny and handsome. That's all for today, and sorry for the long read. Update 4. Return to P-Town. Throughout the year, I've written numerous updates, some while I was happy, others while I was sad, and even a few while I was drunk. But I decided not to post them as I wanted to give you a proper ending to what has become known as the P saga. However, I've come to realize that real life doesn't have a neat conclusion, as there will always be new developments. Hopefully, this update will be the final one for all of us, allowing me to move on and give you a sense of closure on how things have turned out so far. I sincerely hope that you find satisfaction in this update, just as I hope writing it will bring me the closure I've been seeking. I'm choosing to write this now because I'm finally in a good enough place to open up and address the guilt I've felt over not updating sooner. It's incredibly touching to me that so many of you have checked in on me throughout the year. It's hard to believe that nearly a year has passed, and yet there are still new messages and kind words filling my inbox. I'm truly sorry if I haven't responded to everyone, but please know that I've read each and every message, and it warms my heart to know that there are so many kind and compassionate people out there sending their best wishes to a stranger. I'll admit, there's always a part of me that's afraid of writing an update. Some of that fear comes from the real-life repercussions of sharing things online, like the possibility of being identified, which has happened to me. But another part of it is the finality that comes with putting things into words. It's strange, but I feel like if I don't share it with you all, then maybe it's not really happening. I know that's not particularly healthy, and my therapist has pointed this out, so I'm putting on my big girl pants, covered in cat hair as they may be, and facing the facts. It's a bit surreal to realize that this all started almost a year ago, just a few days into the new year, and now we're almost back at that point again. I remember spending New Year's Eve curled up on the couch with Ted and Tortilla, wishing for 2021 to be a year full of adventures and excitement. Well, I guess I better be careful with my wishes this year. I'm not even sure what I'll do on New Year's Eve. Maybe I'll pack up Tortilla and go on some sort of adventure, because I definitely don't plan on sitting on the couch reminiscing about the mess of a year we've had. I will say though, that it was a really comfy couch, and I miss it dearly. I love Ted. I think a part of me will always love him. We spent such an important part of our lives together that it just feels strange not having him around every day. The short version is that he asked me for a divorce, so there's that. It was as amiable as a divorce can be under the circumstances. We cried through the whole process. He called to ask for forgiveness, and I begged him not to leave, but in the end, it's what he needed to start healing from everything that happened. We're still friends. We've been best friends for so long that even though that chapter of our relationship is closed, we're still there for each other. I know you're not here to read about my heartbreak, and you probably just want the details, so I'll share what I know. Keep in mind that now that we're no longer together, I don't have all the inside information. It won't be in chronological sequence. Rather, it will be arranged for clarity. I'll try to break things down to make it simpler to follow. Since the divorce, I haven't heard much from my ex-family, especially from the brother who works in car sales and has a wife, 3 kids, a fish and a cat. Before we lost touch, I knew they had adopted a kitten named Bob. As for the brother who is a chef and businessman, who also has a wife and a child, I have no idea how they're doing now, and I haven't inquired. The brother who is a doctor, despite the chaos in his family, seems to be doing well, particularly in his new relationship. I've met his partner a few times over the year, and she truly is a lovely person. Although they face the usual ups and downs, especially when it comes to dealing with his other brothers, they seem to be in a good place. He even visited me after Ted asked for a divorce. He hugged me and reassured me that I would always be his little sister, regardless of who I was married to. Losing my husband and half of what I considered my family has been incredibly bittersweet, but it's comforting to know that I still have a brother, even though I only have sisters. As for the brother who works in IT and his wife, I finally discovered why he has never liked me. He doesn't particularly like Ted. Apparently, he was the worst of the brothers growing up, and he never appreciated Ted standing up to him or defending Ash. Since the divorce, I have had no contact with him, and I have no intention of changing that. On the other hand, the brother who is a teacher and researcher and his wife have remained pretty much the same. They were always kind to me. He took it upon himself to ensure that Ash was placed on every do not adopt list at shelters, shops, and vets in their area. He's determined to protect any future cats or animals from experiencing the same fate if Ash's mental health were to decline again. While there's always a risk that Ash could somehow get his hands on a stray or have someone adopt a pet for him, he reassured me that he would do everything in his power to prevent that from happening. Knowing this gave me a bit of peace of mind as I left that part of my life behind. The brother who works as an engineer, his now wife and their dog got married when all this chaos began. Back then they were just engaged. It was a really nice ceremony, but I didn't attend, even though both the bride and groom insisted that I was welcome and should come since I was family. Ted also said he wanted me to be there, but I honestly didn't want to ruin any more family pictures. I did attend through Zoom though, so that's how I know it was a lovely event. The brother who is a surgeon, along with his wife, 2 dogs, and dragon, was really helpful when everything went down and was one of the first to take action. He apologized profusely to me, both for the initial pressure to let Ash move in and then for what ultimately transpired. He was especially sorry for the role he played in his brother's mental health struggles. I thanked him for the first 2 apologies and told him that the third one wasn't mine to accept. He understood and mentioned that he'd work on helping his family's relationships, acknowledging that it wasn't fair for me to pay the price for something that wasn't my fault. After the divorce, he reached out again and assured me that if I ever needed anything, he'd be there for me. Overall, it was a nice sentiment, and I know he's now in therapy too, which is a positive step. As for the brother who is a doctor with some military background, along with his wife and 3 kids, he was the most outraged by the entire situation, especially since it directly affected one of his daughters. Initially, they asked me to keep my distance and give them space, but later, his oldest daughter reached out to me. She's a sweetheart and mentioned that she missed how things were before everything unraveled. I didn't pry into what exactly her parents told her, but I assume they had to give her some version of the events since she's old enough to ask the right questions. This brother didn't end up pressing charges, but they did end up moving. Fortunately for their eldest daughter, they relocated to the East Coast, where she found an incredible culinary program that she's very excited about. Daughter 2 is doing well, according to her sister, mother, and therapist. It seems she didn't have much interaction with Ash outside of large family gatherings, and the reason Ash targeted her picture was more because she closely resembles her dad. It wasn't really about her as an individual but rather about who she represents and the fact that she's a woman. I'll explain more about that later. She's still in therapy but is quite irritated by it, insisting that it has nothing to do with her and expressing her frustration about having to move and leave all her friends behind. So in general, the family is safe and adjusting to their new life on the East Coast, though they're still keeping their distance from me. They haven't been thrilled with the weather, but I did tell the eldest daughter that she's welcome to visit anytime. Her mother and I are on friendly enough terms that she'd allow it. As for the father and me, we haven't spoken since everything went down. Any communication has been through his wife and daughters. Some days, just for fun, I'll browse our subreddit and convince myself that my situation isn't as bad as others. On other days, I'll come across stories and wish that my worst problem had been something as simple as someone wearing white to my wedding. We were never best friends, but she wasn't always awful to me. Living on the opposite side of the country, there was always a certain distance in our relationship that I think we both found comfortable. We didn't have to interact much, and we were okay with that. She had plenty of daughters-in-law nearby who gave her grandchildren, so I wasn't as important to her. I still made sure to call her on her birthdays and anniversaries, and she always invited me over for the holidays. When we would visit during the holidays, the house was always so full of people that I was just another face in the crowd, and I was comfortable with that. I think my tendency to be a pushover with this family started during our wedding planning. I tried to be as helpful as possible, doing anything I could to assist, but in the long run, it backfired. The most time we ever spent together was during the wedding preparations. The wedding itself was never that important to Ted or me, we just wanted to be together. But our parents were eager for a big celebration. I was the first of my sisters to get married, and with the age gap between Ted and his older brothers, there hadn't been a big event in the family for a while. While I don't regret marrying Ted at all, I could have done without the big wedding. I sometimes wish we had just gone to the courthouse with just the 2 of us or maybe eloped to Vegas and gotten married by Elvis. I'm not even sure if they still do that, but it sounds just as, if not more, memorable than a huge wedding with over 200 guests. I remember when we finally agreed to the big wedding and how ecstatic she was. It felt like, for the first time, I was more than just another daughter-in-law among many. It's silly, but it felt good to finally feel accepted into the inner circle of the family, even if it came at the cost of a huge wedding. I tried to involve her in the process as much as I could. With 10 sons, I figured she didn't have many opportunities to do girly things. She was lovely to me then, perhaps just to get her way, and I was too naive to see it. I stayed with the golden daughter-in-law for a while after, until another grandchild was born, and then I was relieved to be out of the spotlight and returned to our comfortable coexistence. It was exhausting to be in her favor, with all the expectations that came with it. Looking back, it's crazy to think how much I wanted her to like me, and now, I'd do anything for her not to know I exist. After Ash was committed to a psych ward, she did everything within her power to bring me down. I went no contact with her and most of the family for a while but slowly made amends with some of the others, though not with her. I saw her once when she came with some of the others to pack up Ash's apartment. She went to my parents' place just to yell at me, which was awful. The worst part is that she timed it so well. My parents were at work, my sisters were either at work or school, and it was just me, sobbing on the other side of the door. I heard the doorbell, went to open it, and there she was. She didn't even pretend to be civil and just laid into me. She brought up every single thing I could have possibly ever done to her and her family. She told me I was a failure of a wife, that she hoped I'd be ruined in the divorce, and that she would make sure her son took absolutely everything from me. She said she wouldn't rest until I was destitute and was grateful I was barren because she couldn't stand the idea of tainting her blood with mine. She said so many awful things that day. But that last one is the one that stuck with me the most. Ted and I were never actively trying to have children, but we weren't trying to avoid it either. We figured we were stable enough that if it was meant to be, it would be, But it never happened. Does it make me a terrible person for feeling thankful? My parents' neighbors called the cops, and they escorted her off the property. That's how my sister found me, just sitting on the floor, crying with tortilla. She called Ted, and I guess he got the story from the brother who drove her. I never saw him. I haven't heard a peep from her since. I don't know what Ted told her or what she told him. I just know that after that day, she has left me completely alone, and I'm grateful for that. There are countless things I could say about Ted, and yet it feels like there's so much left unsaid. It's strange not being with him anymore, but I try to honor his needs and wishes. When he asked me for a divorce, his reasoning was, "I cannot do this to you. I will never forgive myself for putting you in this situation. I don't want to expose you to my family ever again and let them hurt you." At first I was upset because he was making decisions about my life without considering what I wanted. But after many long therapy sessions, I realized that while he framed it as a way to protect me, it was also about protecting himself or, at the very least, easing his guilt. Perhaps not having me around helped him feel like nothing had happened. Or maybe he truly believed it was what was best for me. What hurts is that I always thought about what was best for us as a team. But for him, the solution was to dissolve that team. Some days, I wake up angry at him, resenting even his shadow. Other days, I stare at my phone debating whether to call him. Sometimes, I lose that battle and end up calling. He always answers and reassures me that he's still there for me. We sold our house, and naturally, he moved out. For a while, he went to the West Coast to sort out his family issues while our divorce was being finalized. He eventually returned because his job is here, and he loves it. I'm torn between feeling glad he's still in the city that was once our home and hating him for tainting a place I love with painful memories. It's hard to visit places we once cherished together. Maybe I'm the one who needs to move and start over somewhere new, where my past isn't haunted by these memories. I'll share more about Ted's time on the East Coast later. This part is just for life updates. Some people have expressed concern for him and sent well wishes in comments and messages. I pass them along, and he appreciates it. I'll include a snippet from an update I wrote but didn't post on the day he returned to town and asked me to meet. I never used Reddit much before all of this, and now I wonder where my life would be without it. I probably would have continued letting his family walk all over me, and who knows, maybe I'd still be with Sunny. While Ash went on to fulfill all of his dreams. Even now I still receive messages wishing us both well. A part of me feels jealous that I have to share your kindness with him. Why does he deserve your well wishes when I'm the one who ended up alone? You all are bigger and better people than I am. I did tell him that you hoped he was okay. I'll admit, I told him partly to hurt him, to make him feel guilty. Maybe I'll regret it someday, but I just needed him to feel something other than pity for me. The worst part? He laughed. It was the hollow laugh of a man who's been through too much, but the sound still stung. It's not fair that he gets to laugh. He said thank you and that one day, he hopes he'll be the man you all thought he was or could be. He also apologized for disappointing you, acknowledging that this isn't the ending you wanted for us, though some of you wished for this outcome from the very beginning. I'm not sure if you've changed your mind after reading all the updates or if you still believe I should have left him. Well, he's always liked being ahead of things, so he left me instead. As for Ted, he's doing as well as can be expected. Like me, he has good days and bad days. We meet up occasionally to check in on each other. He tells me what's going on in his life, and I share how I'm coping. After his mom's visit to my parents' house, I moved out again. I haven't invited him over to my new place, nor do I think I want to. Having a space free of memories of him or his family for the first time in a decade feels like what I need right now. Tortilla misses him, but I try to convince myself that she understands. I'm not even sure where to begin when it comes to Ash. After he was committed following the fight with his brothers, the engineer, the teacher and researcher, and the car salesman, who had come to help sort everything out in the early days, he stayed in the facility for a few weeks. During that time, he repeatedly asked to see Ted, but Ted never went. At one point Ash wrote Ted a letter. Initially, I didn't want to know what it said, but eventually, I asked Ted about it. Ted told me that the letter was Ash's attempt to reconnect, but Ted responded by telling Ash to stop asking to see him. He told Ash that, for once in his life, he needed to prioritize himself and his own needs over Ash's. After a few weeks, the engineer arranged for Ash to be transferred to the West Coast. I'm not entirely sure whether he was placed in a different facility or released into their custody, but once the transfer was finalized, which took about 2 months, their mom, along with the brother who works in IT and the chef, came to pack up Ash's apartment and officially moved him back west. Ash eventually moved in with their mom. The surgeon took charge of overseeing Ash's treatment, and I trust that he continues to ensure Ash receives the care he needs. When Ted went over to have a confrontation with his family, it was a difficult experience. He first met with his brothers, though I'm not sure if all of them were there, likely just the ones most involved. From what Ted shared with me, the engineer discussed some of the insights he had gained from speaking with Ash's doctors. While Ash was on the East Coast, he was treated for what they described as a psychotic episode, and he has been in treatment ever since. The exact diagnosis is unclear to me, but they talked about a lot of things during that meeting. They discussed their upbringing, how the bullying affected Ash, and how Ted's protectiveness over the years created an unhealthy emotional attachment. A few other issues were also brought to light. I'm not entirely sure if these conclusions were reached during therapy sessions, if they were communicated by Ash's therapist, or how they came about exactly. But this is what Ted told me when he returned. Listening to him talk about it felt strange. He was so detached, almost as if he was talking about someone else's family. I suppose that's just his way of processing everything that happened. I know many of you have been curious about the type of bullying that could have led Ash to become the person he is today. Ted shared some of those details with me, and while I won't specify which brother did what, allowing you to fill in the blanks with your own assumptions, just know that while some of the brothers are genuinely remorseful for their actions, others seem indifferent. Many of you speculated on the nature of the torment, and while some of your guesses were close, the reality was even harsher. Beyond the typical bullying tactics like punching, mocking, and name-calling, there were much crueler acts. These included locking Ash in cabinets, stealing his clothes, leaving him outside overnight, locking all the bathrooms so he had no choice but to wet himself, and threatening him with various items and weapons. They would also abandon him at places, forcing him to walk miles home in all kinds of weather, dress him in diapers, antagonize him relentlessly, tie him up and drag him behind ATVs, dump water on him and leave him to freeze, and even put itching powder in his underwear. The list goes on and on. I know sibling rivalry and bullying can happen, but the way Ted described it felt incredibly malicious. I can't fathom what Ash could have done to deserve such treatment. It doesn't excuse his later behavior, but it does offer some explanation. His hatred for women appears to stem from the same source. He seems to blame his mother for not protecting him from his brothers, which likely shaped his view of women as weak and ineffective. If his own mother couldn't protect him, who could? The brothers didn't help matters either, as they would alienate him from any girls who showed interest in him. This isolation is how his unhealthy emotional attachment to Ted began. Since Ted was the only one who stood up for him. But we all know how that story ended. Ash is currently living on the West Coast, and I hope that's where he will stay indefinitely. I wish I could provide you with more concrete information, as I know many of you were looking for definitive answers, but I just can't bring myself to dig any deeper or ask more questions. When everything first began, shortly after I'd finished school, I kept 2 pairs of shoes that had been involved in the incident where they got peed on. I threw away most of the other things, but those 2 pairs were different. The first pair might not matter much to you, but the second pair was significant to me. They were the first thing I ever bought with my own money, earned from my very first internship while I was still in school. Those shoes symbolized the first step toward my independence. Having to quit both of my jobs, move back in with my parents, and lose Ted was devastating, and it just felt so unfair to think about those shoes, tucked away in a box, and everything they represented that I had lost. Now, I am slowly rebuilding the first steps in this process. I'm not entirely sure what the future holds for me and Tortilla, but I'm taking things one day at a time. I haven't worn those shoes since they were ruined, but maybe one day, when I feel like I've regained my sense of self and independence, I'll put them on again. As the holidays approach, I don't know what mine will look like, but I sincerely hope yours are filled with light and joy. Sending much love from my mending heart, Ellie and Tortilla the cat. Update 5. Pee and tell no tales. It's been some time since my last visit here, and I've even stopped composing those unposted updates. I just didn't want to dwell on life or anything else. How have you all been? How is the new year treating you? I hope you're all well and healthy, that your cats are receiving plenty of pets, and that you're finding moments of comfort. I'll try to keep this update brief. I've received a few comments and messages pointing out that my updates are overly lengthy and meander before reaching the point, so I apologize for that. While it's not my responsibility to entertain you with the details of my life, I'm writing this due to the tremendous support and affection I've received from many here on Reddit, and for those who have shown concern for my well-being and requested updates. If you find this update too lengthy, feel free to stop reading at any time. My story is merely for entertainment here, and you can engage with it as much or as little as you like. Last I wrote was just before the holidays, and looking back, My holiday plans were perhaps not the brightest. Despite my previous declaration that I wouldn't just sit on the couch and wallow, that's exactly what I ended up doing. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. My family loves the festive season, filled with Christmas cheer and joy, and I didn't want to dampen their spirits. So I told my dad I was spending it with a friend who had recently lost her husband. She ended up going out of state to be with his parents, and I stayed home alone with Tortilla, watching movies. Ted called me on Christmas Day, and for the first time I didn't pick up. Many of you will probably be proud of this small victory, as so many suggested I should cut him off entirely. Please bear with my gradual steps. I just couldn't sever ties with my best friend overnight, even after everything that has happened. He texted later to check if I was okay, having noticed from my sister's Facebook photos that I wasn't with my family. I wonder if I should ask my sisters to block him. They all love him, and he loves them. Before all the turmoil, he truly was an incredible person, and even now, he's trying his best to navigate through the aftermath. I'm not sure if it's the way I write or the fact that my perspective is influenced by our relationship, but Ted isn't as terrible as some might think based on my updates. He's grappling with a significant amount of trauma, facing the actions of his family directly, which is incredibly challenging. After receiving his text, I spent hours contemplating a response but ultimately didn't know what to say. While I wasn't fine, he remains the person who understands me the most. The decade we shared wasn't wasted. Our relationship didn't end because our love did, but because it was the healthier choice for both of us at the time. You are not experiencing the turbulence of having your life flipped upside down, going from a nice family dynamic to facing alone, as you read these updates from a distance. Unlike me, Ted had fewer supporters. Some of his brothers now harbor even greater resentment towards him due to the unfolding events. He lost not only his partner and his little brother but also our cat Tortilla, and despite everything, his mother too. It's easy to cast him as the villain from your perspective because you're only getting my side of the story, but he's also suffered deeply through this ordeal. He's human and prone to mistakes, though I don't consider our divorce one of them. I responded to his text simply, stating I had stayed in quietly with Tortilla for Christmas, which probably tipped him off that something was amiss. He found out where I live and asked to meet at the nearby park, which I agreed to. I understand if you think less of this minor accomplishment, but I value the small steps. We spent several hours talking that day. Had I known he was alone, I might have invited him over, or at least spent the holiday with him. Many suggest that completely cutting ties with him is the best path, but I disagree. My stance might change in the future, but for now, it seems we still provide mutual support. Day by day I find I need him less, but there are moments, like that day, when we lean on each other for support. I'd like to believe we can remain friends, but I know that might not be sustainable in the long run. Eventually, Ted will find a new partner, and they probably won't be too fond of me. Or maybe we'll just drift apart. It's possible that one day, I'll end up resenting him for everything that happened, but right now, he's been a source of support in ways others can't be. It might seem foolish, but I don't think anyone else truly understands who I am at this moment. I'm not the same person I was before all of this, and I'm not even the same person I was a year ago. Going through this ordeal with his family changed us both, and not everyone grasps why I'm uncomfortable bringing kids to the bathroom, or why I had to leave work sick when my boss gave me sunflowers on International Women's Day. I do believe that we both lost parts of ourselves that were perhaps too naive, and we've grown in ways neither of us anticipated. This experience has grounded us both. I've lived a very privileged and sheltered life, and even though I've lost some of the brightness I once had, I feel like this new perspective has helped me connect with others more deeply and understand their struggles in a more empathetic way, or at least I'd like to think so. Maybe that's just what therapy does for you, in which case I highly recommend everyone go to therapy, whether they've dealt with something like this or not. Overall, I think we're both doing a little better. Tortilla is thriving, apart from a minor health scare. Our new place has plenty of windows, which means lots of sunny spots for her to enjoy, and she's been soaking it all up. Ted has gone no contact with most of his family and is keeping low contact with the brother who is a teacher and researcher and the one who is a doctor. I don't have much to update about Ash or the rest of the brothers, except that the brother who is a doctor is really sad that Ted is distancing himself, even though he's cut off most of the others too. He understands but wants Ted to know he'll be there whenever he's ready. It's been pointed out to me several times that what was always referred to as bullying was actually abuse, and I think it's important to use that term when describing their childhood. I believe that part of the reason everything collapsed the way it did was because of how dismissive everyone was about it and how much they all, including Ted and Ash, downplayed it as boys will be boys. Brothers are like that. Or simply, I thought it was normal. If any of the wives or I had known the full extent of what happened in their childhoods, perhaps we would have made different decisions. Of course, my ex-mother-in-law bears a lot of responsibility for that, but I guess we've all learned from it. I don't think I'm ready to date yet. I feel like I need to learn how to be alone first. I've been with Ted since college, and it's been quite some time. Honestly, I'm not even sure I know how to go on a first date anymore, but I suppose I can always Google it when the time comes. Adapting to solitude has been a strange experience. I don't want to call it loneliness because sometimes it's nice, you know? I'll finish a book, close it, and the quiet that follows isn't eerie, it's comforting. I've had to learn a lot of things on my own, which made me realize just how much I relied on others to help with tasks I was always capable of doing myself. For example, I changed a tire for the first time. It was scary because it happened on the highway, but I managed. I also learned that different plants have different care requirements after accidentally killing a bunch, but now I have a little basil plant that's doing great. I discovered that action movies aren't really my thing since the fast pace and constant tension don't appeal to me. I even learned how to cook shrimp, something I never did before because Ted was allergic. Pro tip, always remember to devein a shrimp. There are also things I miss about being with Ted. Like when I had to drive myself to the emergency room after cutting myself while cooking, and I couldn't help but think that hospitals should offer valet services. Tortilla had a health scare and being alone in the waiting room was truly awful. The anniversary of a childhood friend's death came and went and Ted wasn't there to comfort me like he usually would. I also really dislike mopping. And now I'm stuck doing it myself. That's about it, I think. I haven't seen Ted since Christmas, though we still text often and have called each other a few times. We're both learning to be apart without withdrawing all of our support at once. We're still healing. I'm still healing, but now I can confidently say that I can see a bright side, whereas before I was just getting through one day at a time. I don't know if that makes sense. Ted's birthday is coming up. I don't think I'll visit him, but I'll ask his friends to make sure he's not alone. I've been considering adopting an older cat for him. He's always felt strongly about them, and I think it would be good for him, but I'm unsure if it would be overstepping. What do you all think? Lastly, I want to thank you for your constant support and well wishes. You truly are an amazing community that shows a side of humanity that truly is beautiful. Of course, Reddit has its dark corners and mean people, but the majority of you are such a strong support system without even knowing me and the many others you have helped. I just feel like perhaps the internet is not so bad. I'll make sure to pay back and pass on all of the kindness I've received from all of you, and maybe one Redditor at a time, we can leave this place a little bit better than we found it. At this point, I think this is as good a final update as any, a relatively content ending with a hopeful future. I might surprise you all with a year in the life update sometime in the future, but for now, I can say that everything will be okay. Sending head parts to all who want them, intended for cats, but I don't discriminate based on species, and all my love from my mending heart, Ellie and Tortilla. Hello lovely people of Reddit. How are you? Almost an entire year has gone by and I hope that we have all grown older and wiser. It's endearing to know that even after all this time, there are still people following my journey and sending me heartwarming messages and comments. Also, a special thank you to whomever reported me to Reddit Care. I didn't even know that was a service they offered. I hope it came from a place of caring and concern. I guess at some point the story made it onto TikTok, so hello to all those who came from there. At this rate, I'm half expecting AOL chat rooms or Yahoo Answers to show up too. The new 20s are kicking my ass, and not in a particularly positive way. I cannot wait for this decade to be over. A Redditor called my last update a holiday special, and it made me laugh. I don't think they meant it kindly, but it struck me as funny because I'm an absolute sucker for the Hallmark Channel. So here I am again after the holidays. For my haters and those who don't want to sit through a half-hour monologue, here's the TLDR. I got a robot mop, my basil died, things started to look somewhat normal, my ex-husband tried to kill himself, and now I'm back living at my parents'. I've highlighted the bits mentioned in the TLDR in case you want to skip to those parts. At the suggestion of several Redditors, I got myself a steam mop. Initially, it was helpful, but I still had to go through the motions of mopping, and the slight dampness left on the floor that would make my socks wet was still bothersome. So, following the advice of others, I invested in a robot mop. I already had a Roomba but didn't realize they made mopping versions too. It's perfect, and I absolutely love it. I run it while I'm out for the day, and when I come home, the floors are freshly dry, which is the best feeling in the world. Unfortunately, my little basil plant didn't survive. I think it was because I moved it from its spot in the kitchen, where it was getting more light than before. Before it died, I used the last of it to make a delicious pasta salad with orzo, cherry tomatoes, mozzarella balls, olive oil, salt and basil. Simple but tasty. I was also gifted a few miniature rosé plants, but despite my best efforts, they didn't last more than a few months. After that, I kind of gave up on live greenery. In my internal monologue, life sometimes feels like a series of challenges, one after another. One of my sisters has always liked the saying, "Life sucks and then you die," which she interprets as a reminder not to dwell on the bad things because life is short and unpredictable. Right now, I find myself resonating with the more literal interpretation of that phrase. I think the expression, "when it rains, it pours," captures a similar sentiment. I went on a date recently, as a friend of mine set me up with one of his coworkers, and it felt awkward. I'm not sure if I've always been this awkward, if first dates are just naturally awkward, or if we simply didn't connect, but I spent the entire dinner feeling like I needed to either fight or flee. The guy was lovely, and maybe we should have done something less formal than dinner. I haven't been on a first date in years, and I guess coffee is the trend now. Perhaps I should have gone that route, or maybe I just wasn't ready yet. My new job, which I got after everything happened, is wonderful. My boss no longer gives me flowers. I'm not sure if he noticed what happened last year and took the hint, or if someone mentioned it to him. Now, when everyone else gets flowers, I receive lamps instead. It might sound random, but I love lamps and light up things. Over the past year, he's gifted me a little cat night light that brings me so much joy, as well as some fairy lights and a Himalayan rock salt lamp. He's a great guy, and I really appreciate the effort. My coworkers are great too, and the work we do is both fun and fulfilling, which is something I didn't have before. I used to juggle 2 jobs, one that was fulfilling and one that paid the bills. It's amazing to now have just one job that does both. In hindsight, it feels like I wasted so much time at my previous job, but this realization is a silver lining from everything that happened. Tortilla is doing well. She's on prescription food now and isn't too happy about it. Even though it's been months. Winter is always a bit rough for her because she gets extra fluffy, and you can tell it bothers her. This means more brushing and de-shedding. If you have long-haired pets, I recommend the Furminator, though Amazon has cheaper alternatives. Tortilla is getting older, so I do what I can to make sure she's comfortable. One of my sisters recently got a kitten, and we watch him when she's out of town. Tortilla absolutely adores him. Matcha, the kitten, pretends not to like all the grooming she gives him, but he's not fooling anyone. If Tortilla is asleep, Matcha will cuddle up with her, but if she wakes up first, he'll quickly run away. I'm rambling, maybe because I don't know where to begin or what to share. It's also unsettling because I know certain people keep tabs on me through this account. While I don't really care if they do, it still feels odd, like the feeling you get when someone is watching you from afar. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's how it feels. Anyway, when I'm feeling particularly masochistic, I'll read comments where the P saga has been shared. Most of you on my own threads are absolutely lovely and supportive, but outside of my virtual walls, people share harsher opinions. I know it's unhealthy and my therapist knows it too, but it also grounds me a bit and helps me see things from perspectives I hadn't considered. For example, someone called me deranged for being so obsessed with cats. I hadn't really noticed, but a good portion of my updates do revolve around cats and their well-being. It's true, I do love cats. That person said I showed more empathy towards cats than I did towards Ash, my family-in-law, or even Ted. And yeah, a little. You can consider me sociopathic if you'd like, but domesticated animals don't have a say in what goes on in their lives. We as pet owners, make decisions for them and try to make the best ones we can. In regards to Sunny, yes, I absolutely will always feel more empathy for her than for anyone else involved because she was helpless. There was no other option for her, no safe place, and no one to advocate for her. Even if you take out the sentimental component of my attachment to cats, from a humane standpoint, it was still awful, and that's why animal cruelty charges were considered. Some people told me I was making things worse than they really were, that what I went through was nothing, and that I'm just being emotional, which I might be a little. Some people think that X, Y, or Z were the real victims. I believe everyone involved is a victim in some way, but just because you're a victim in your own story doesn't mean you can't be a bad guy in someone else's. Take my ex Millie, for example. She's the person who has received the least amount of sympathy in everything I've read, but her husband was an abusive father and husband. I know her upbringing was less than stellar, and she has a lot of unresolved trauma from the deaths of her daughters. Does it excuse her behavior? No. Does it explain it a little? Maybe. Does it undo all the damage she caused? Definitely not. Although Ash had a very bad childhood and was abused, This came as a surprise to everyone, and things went badly so quickly because he was very well put together, or at least he was very good at controlling or hiding his feelings. He graduated from a well-known university with a degree in engineering and had a safe job. He was happy with his life. Everything went wrong after he finished because of the pandemic and being alone. I've given this a lot of thought, but I do wonder what would have happened if there hadn't been a plague. Would Ash not have lost it? Could it have been something else? Could someone else have opened the room with the bones? The what-ifs in their heads are their own journey. So many lives with happy, sad and tragic ends have come to mind. I know it's not healthy to think about those things all the time, but I do sometimes wish I had those options. But I have to say that even in my wildest dreams I never really saw Ted dying. First, let me say that he is not dead. He's fine at the moment. To keep in mind, this is all written from my point of view. Ted was the real person in the middle of it all. I wasn't even hurt. I had to go to a lot of therapy meetings before I could accept that it wasn't my fault. I just got the bad luck of drawing the short stick. Ash turned out the way he did because his family abused and ignored him for a long time. That was going to come out somehow or another, even without me being involved. I wish there was a way for him to have been persuaded to see a real doctor and be helped in a safe and healthy way, but I guess we'll never know. I'm glad I broke the camel's back instead of B1's kid. It's likely that things would have been very different and scarier. As you all remember, I kept in touch with B6 after the divorce, but after the suggestion of many of you and several people in my life, I decided to take a step back and distance myself from him. A few months later, B6 reached out to me, asking if I had heard from Ted recently, which I hadn't. He explained that some family issues had come up, though he didn't go into details, and that many of them had tried to reach Ted but hadn't been able to. He told me he was worried and that he was planning to come to our city to check on him, asking me to let him know if I heard anything. I knew Ted had been deliberately keeping his family at a distance, including B6, so it didn't really surprise me that they hadn't heard from him. But to give credit where it's due, it's not like Ted to completely ignore his family. I sent him a message letting him know that B6 had contacted me looking for him, but I didn't get a reply. By that point, Ted and I had already distanced ourselves from each other, as had been suggested repeatedly in my previous updates, so it wasn't alarming when he didn't respond, though I noticed he did read my message. That was about 2 weeks ago. Now B6 tells me he's in town and wants to meet up with me. I said yes because I missed him and asked him to join me for dinner at a new place I thought he'd like. He said no, just coffee. That was strange because B6 loves food and always says yes to new places. But I thought he was only in town for a few days and wanted to spend more time with Ted. We met in my park, and he really did look rough. That one time I took a step back and felt that dread you get when you know someone is going to tell you bad news. To be honest, I thought he was going to say that Ash was back in town, but he looked like he was about to give up. He told me that some more family news had come to light. I wasn't really interested, so I didn't ask for more information. I am sorry that I am not able to give you more hot news, which I know you all like. As he checked on Ted, he saw that he was getting worse. Ted only drank a little sometimes for fun and special events, but by the time he got home at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, he was fully drunk. Ted's brother, who is a doctor and is single, stayed with him, woke him up, and eventually, on Sunday, told him what was going on with his family. Ted's brother, who is a doctor and is single, left to get his things from the hotel and came back to find Ted unable to speak or do anything. Ted had to stay in the hospital for a while after his brother called 911. It seems like Ted had been on a self-destructive bender for some time. I'm not sure if something specific triggered this or if everything that had been happening to him over the past 2 years finally caught up with him. When I told my therapist about it, she said that made sense and might also help explain the breakup. Maybe I'm just trying to figure out why he divorced me after all this time, but that makes sense to me because I know Ted so well. He's always been a great defender. I guess he learned that early on by taking care of Ash. He's the kind of guy who will watch a girl's drink at a bar and always checks on a child who isn't with an adult. He also likes to be in charge, which makes him anxious most of the time. He plans things very well, but it's hard for him when things don't go as planned. It sometimes makes him stiff, but it also makes him so consistent, which are all things I loved about him. He always said sorry for not being able to defend me and putting me in danger during all of our conversations before the divorce. I thought I had reassured him that it wasn't his fault, but I guess he was never convinced. He was also coming to terms with the fact that his family wasn't as nice as he thought. He realized that he had contributed to ignoring the family's bad behavior as a child. Realizing how bad and horrible his past was and how horrible some of his brothers are really wears a person down. He had to deal with his own pain, the immense guilt he felt, and the feeling that he had no control over anything. Ted did go to a rehab center for a while. He wrote me emails but wouldn't let me visit. The feelings I had while reading them were too private to share with you, but they made me cry. The first few were sorry for making me worry and telling me that he was okay. The next few were rambling, and that includes me, but the last few were really great. It was very interesting to see him change from being very nice and sorry to being the same man I fell in love with. Watching him understand things I'd been saying for years and seeing things I hadn't seen before was also very interesting. I think it helped him in the long run. I agree that writing is the best way to deal with things, which is why I'm here. It helped him get his thoughts in order. Why did he send emails to me instead of a notebook or emails to himself? I have no idea, but I'm not upset. Someone sent him an email where he was mad at everything and everyone. He was angry because everything was wrong, and I felt so much better. It was cool to read that his spark came back. In his first email, he told me not to react, but to just read them and listen. He also said I could delete them if I wanted to, and he would not know. In the angry email, he called me by a nickname he hadn't used in years, since before we got married. That really annoyed me. He was talking about a trip we had taken with some friends and how they broke up in the middle of it and didn't want to go back home because they already paid for everything, but they wouldn't be with each other. We had to split the boys and girls up to do the planned tasks, and he was miserable the whole time. He said something like, "I still don't forgive Alyssa for Venice. The plan was for you and me, not for me and Rag to be on a boat." While there's nothing wrong with the pet name itself, it made me think of all the things I had lost and the good times I had with them. I did not do what he asked and responded to his email anyway. We began to write to each other more because of this. He didn't get mad when I answered, so I'm not sure if that was his whole point or not. We emailed back and forth for a few weeks, and it was nice. When we emailed, we never talked about Ash or his family. I don't know if that's because it didn't come up easily or because he was trying to avoid the subject, but it was nice to just talk to him like we did when we first met. What we used to talk on was Facebook Messenger, and just writing to him made me remember those times. It's silly how much I miss and still love him. It was like getting my best friend back through those stupid texts, even though he wasn't my husband anymore. He's now back at his house. Since his brother, who is an engineer, worked from home, his wife and dog stayed with him for a while until he got settled in. He is now taking medication, has more people who care about him, and is doing a lot better. It's great that he stopped cutting people out while still setting healthy limits. He's back in touch with his brother, who is a teacher and researcher, his brother who is an engineer, and his brother who is a doctor, who were always his best friends besides Ash. He hasn't talked to anyone else though. I feel bad for his nibblings because I know he misses them and was close to some of them. Though, yes, that was something he needed. For what it's worth, the brother who is a doctor doesn't talk to anyone either. Besides Ted and Ash, he was always a little distant. I think because he knew, but now that everything is over, he's getting closer to the brother who is a teacher and researcher and the brother who is an engineer. Which is another good thing. I'm not sure what kind of contact the brother who is an engineer and the brother who is a teacher and researcher have with everyone else, but I do know that the brother who is a teacher and researcher is involved in some way. However, he knows and respects Ted's limits and doesn't share information with or about him. Ted and I have seen each other a few times, sometimes at events for friends and other times just to meet up. I can say for sure that he is doing well now. He put on the weight back on, and now his hair is shiny again. His shoulders are straight again, and you can't see his freckles anymore. That means he's been outdoors, which is good. He went on leave of absence and then went back to work last week. I can tell that it gives him a lot of meaning. I can see how that time was extra itchy for him because he could never sit still. We did go to a rescue in the end, and he got an old cat. I think his name is Socks because his paws are white. He loves people a lot, and is a great cat. He also doesn't have many teeth left. Ted has been trying to change his name to Macbeth, but he doesn't like it. Ted's argument is that he doesn't answer Socks either, so maybe he will be successful. Torella was thrilled to see Ted when I took her to see them. She didn't like Macbeth because she doesn't like animals that are bigger than her. Living back with my parents has been an unexpected twist, but I'm making the best of it. 2022 was particularly rough for those of us on the East Coast, with 2 hurricanes hitting my town. My apartment flooded during one of the state of emergencies, and even though my dad always invites us to stay with them during storms, so Tortilla and I were safe, it still sucked. It almost felt like the universe or some kind of divine intervention was at play, especially considering the 2 pairs of shoes I had kept, the ones with all the memories attached to them, were completely ruined. I tried everything, even consulted professionals, but there was no saving them. Of course, it wasn't just the shoes. Half of my belongings had to be replaced, and many other sentimental items were lost. But you all know how much those shoes meant to me, even if they were practically a biohazard. My apartment took quite a beating. The floors had to be ripped out due to water damage, and by the time we got in to assess the damage, it was already rotting and molding underneath. It was a significant investment to fix everything, and I ended up having to replace almost all of my appliances, including my beloved robot mop, and most of my furniture. For the record, I did use sandbags, but they just weren't enough against the storm. Insurance covered part of the repairs, but as anyone who's gone through the claims process knows, it's rarely enough. After weighing my options, I decided the best course was to fix what I could and sell the apartment. Moving has never been something I enjoyed, but this time it felt especially depressing. Packing up my life into just a few boxes was a stark contrast to when I first left for college. I had so much more with me then. So for now, I'm staying with my parents. It's a little frustrating, but I'm grateful to be here. The house feels a bit empty since the last of my sisters moved away to college, leaving it quiet except for the cats running around. But, honestly, cats are great company. I'm in the process of closing on a new apartment in a high-rise, so hopefully, I won't have to deal with flooding again. I'll miss my old park, but the new place has a fantastic location with everything I need close by. I could even bike to work if I wanted to, but I'd have to learn how to ride a bike first. Growing up, my dad was overprotective and was convinced we'd get hurt if we tried to ride one, so I never learned. I'm not sure if I'm too old to learn now, but I'm willing to swallow my pride and try with training wheels if I have to. The new apartment has much bigger windows, which means lots of sunny patches for Tortilla to enjoy. I had plans to build a catio at my old place since I had a small terrace, but the new place has a balcony, which seems a little too risky for that kind of setup. So that's where life is at the moment. I've been focusing on work and spending time with my parents. I've also booked a trip for March, which will be my first time traveling alone. I'm a bit nervous since I've never planned a trip by myself before. Ted was always the great planner, but I suppose that's part of the adventure. I've been taking classes to learn the language of the country I'm visiting, so we'll see how much I've actually picked up. I want to talk about something important that made me write this post and pick the title. I didn't put it in the summary because I didn't think it was necessary for people who don't want to read my thoughts to know all the details. When Ted's single brother, the doctor, called me about Ted, I thought at first that he was telling me Ash was back. That wasn't true, as you now know. There was a letter for me at my folks' house while Ted was getting help. It came from Ash. I didn't feel afraid for the first time in the 2 years since the Peace Saga. I read it. I'm not sure if it was because I'd been getting Ted's emails or because I've been getting better, thanks to my therapist, who really should charge me more but turned down a raise when I offered it, saying that's not how it works. Ash said sorry. I hadn't even known some of the things he did to me were microaggressions until he admitted them. He also admitted to doing many things that had always bothered me. He just said sorry and didn't try to explain anything. He also said some other things that both surprised and didn't surprise you. Some of you had already guessed some of them. It seemed like the letter was a bit disorganized and hurried, but I get it. He told Ted he was sorry for hurting him and that he probably knew his pain better than anyone else. He also admitted that he had hurt Ted so badly that he would never be in Ted's life again. After everything he had done, he said that if he couldn't help Ted, he could at least make up for it with me by admitting his mistakes. He did it as a small way to say sorry to Ted, even if Ted never knew about it. One line that stood out to me was when he said, "I'm sorry I ruined your marriage, but I don't think I ruined your life. Ted would not have chosen you if you weren't resilient." He also thanked me for trying. I had really tried at first to be friends with him, but after the incident that was obviously a big no. He admitted he had given up on people, except for Ted, trying to connect with him, and he regretted that he never gave me a chance. He confessed he was jealous that I brought Ted happiness in ways he couldn't, and he regretted that because of him, Ted had lost that. I think it was his way of trying to ease the guilt he felt about hurting the person he cared about most while still respecting his boundaries in a way. Of course, he had disrespected mine, but I understand what he was trying to do. I haven't told Ted about the letter, and I don't think I will. I did tell Ted's brother, the doctor who's single, and although he was furious at first, he eventually understood and accepted it. He told me it was up to me whether I shared it with Ted or not. He didn't think it would cause much harm but also didn't see it helping anything. He advised that if I ever felt compelled to tell or show Ted the letter, I should wait until Ted was in a better place and maybe discuss it with his therapist, or bring it up in therapy. Another Christmas has passed, and this time I did spend it with my family. My sisters are the best, and to mark important events in my life, they each bought me a pair of shoes. It was an empty shoebox to stand for the new shoes I need to buy for this new beginning. I cried most of Christmas morning because it was the most meaningful gift I've ever received. I saw Ted on the first day of the year. We both went to a party at a friend's house and had a great time. We didn't plan to spend the whole time together, but we often got lost in our own thoughts and laughed together without being rude to anyone else. He sat down next to me and put his head on my shoulder at midnight. I was sitting in the back, away from the couples. There was a nice quiet while everyone else rang in the new year. It's wonderful to have Ted back as a friend. I love him still. I most likely always will. It does not work for me to get him out of my system, even though I stay away from him, don't talk to him, and sleep with someone else. I'm not sure if he's my match and we'll always be drawn to each other, or if it's just because we've been together for so long and it's easy and comfortable. I love him though. He was a different man before, now and in the past. There is no one I love more. To be honest, I think I'll love the person he becomes every day after. I'm not going to give up on him. Even if I have to. I'd rather keep him as a friend than keep pushing him away when I'm more than happy to have him around. He makes me happy and I deserve it. Is that really wrong? Most of you keep telling me to let him go because he did me a favor and we should stop talking to each other, but I miss him. I might become stupid, but hey, I'll be stupid and happy. He can ask me to step back, and I will. But for now, I'm happy, and I'll think about the future later. I believe we both deserve that. But things are good right now, and I think we both need that. We both still have a lot of work to do and more healing to come. I believe we all need good, including you two. Thanks for reading all the way through my rants. I hope that everything goes well for you. May you find $20, find your favorite drink at the store, and master the art of making coffee. Really though, thank you for always letting me talk about my life without being judged and with love, respect and understanding. Every single one of you is amazing and nice. You should always know that I love and respect each of you. Thanks for taking care of me. Tortilla and Ellie love you. Now to the next story, story 3. She thought bringing her affair partner to our kids' party would be fine, but I made sure she regretted every moment of that decision. Hello, I've been following stories on this platform for a while, trying to make sense of the infidelity I'm currently experiencing. To give a bit of background, my wife and I have been married for 8 years, though we've been together for a few more years beyond that, and we have 2 small children. This year has been particularly challenging for us, and we've had our share of arguments. However, I never imagined that any of these issues would lead my wife to cheat on me. Lately, I've noticed her becoming distant and uncommunicative, so I decided to address it one evening. During our conversation, she revealed that she wasn't happy anymore and felt that the spark between us was gone. Initially, I blamed myself, thinking that I hadn't been attentive enough as a husband, which is something I genuinely struggled with. However, the following day I discovered a suspiciously affectionate message on her phone. When I looked further, I found that she had been messaging another man for quite some time, with exchanges full of I love you and discussions about a future together. I was absolutely fucking devastated. Following the advice I found in many discussions here, I didn't talk to her right away. As an alternative, I took the time to learn more, talk to a few lawyers, one of whom I've now hired, and focus on clearing my thoughts. A few days ago, I approached my wife calmly and asked if she was having an affair. After a few minutes of hesitation, she admitted to everything. To summarize, the affair had been going on for 6 months, and she claimed it was the deepest emotional connection she had ever experienced. I call bullshit on that, but I digress. I laid out a list of boundaries, including cutting off all contact with the other man and attending marriage counseling, among other things. What really made me doubt the possibility of reconciliation was her intense anger when I asked her to sever all ties with him, especially when I insisted she do it in front of me. She even asked to meet him one last time for closure. I stood firm and told her that if he was so important, she should pack her bags and go live with him. She eventually backed down, but not before calling me a controlling asshole. She sent a text this morning, which she showed me, but my instincts tell me she'll find another way to communicate with him. At this point, I don't see much hope for us, and honestly, I'm not even sure I want to try anymore. The only reason I'm considering giving it one last shot is so that I can look my kids in the eye in 20 years and say that I at least tried. We have a marriage counseling session scheduled for tomorrow, but I'm seriously contemplating filing for divorce before wasting any more time or emotional energy. I'm hesitant to move too quickly because of the kids, but is this the right approach? Update 1. The past few weeks have been incredibly challenging, to say the least. However, they have also provided me with a great deal of time for deep reflection and introspection. To update from my previous post, my wife and I did attend counseling sessions following the initial confrontation. I must admit that this particular counselor has been remarkably effective in listening to both sides without assigning blame. The therapist has guided us through this new reality and helped identify some structural issues within our relationship. Although these issues do not justify my wife's behavior, it has been somewhat enlightening to understand them in the context of avoiding similar mistakes in any future relationships. As I mentioned earlier, my wife's initial response to my boundary of cutting off contact with the affair partner seemed to be ignored. I discovered a few brief messages exchanged between them before she completely erased her chat log and phone records. Upon realizing this, I made the decision to proceed with filing for divorce, and she was served just a few days ago. Concurrently, I had an open and honest conversation with my father-in-law, as we have always been close. I felt it was crucial to focus on supporting our children rather than the relationship, since it was clear that my wife preferred to brush everything under the rug. As expected, my wife was initially very upset when her fantasy was shattered, but our therapist intervened and discussed it with her from my perspective, explaining why this needed to happen. It seems she is beginning to understand the real consequences of her actions and is starting to grasp what will be lost from here on out. As I enter this new period of my life, I'm trying to process my identity's astonishing change. I changed from a spouse and parent to someone else, just like my wife. Since I filed for divorce, my wife has been visibly shocked by my actions. She has been extremely emotional these past few days, and I genuinely believe she never thought I would have the strength to walk away. I have maintained some distance between us, yet I have noticed a distinct change in her behavior. On a more positive note, we have managed to communicate more effectively, keeping our discussions civil and centered around our shared responsibilities, particularly our children. I have been very clear with her that she inflicted a deep wound on me, and it is up to her to do the hard work necessary to repair it. I need space and time if there is ever a chance for me to forgive her. I cannot emphasize enough how selfish, self-centered, and downright horrible her actions were. Despite this, I have not lost sight of the fact that we still have children to raise, and that is where my focus lies as I figure out how to move forward toward personal happiness. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who provided comments and insights previously. I am genuinely proud that I found the strength not to drown in self-pity, anger, or sadness. Instead, I was able to make the right decisions to preserve my dignity and look forward to a brighter future. Although I do not yet know all the steps I need to take and my emotions are still in constant flux, I am beginning to experience a sense of inner peace. Once again, thank you all. Small update. I am now in the part after serving my sentence and am working closely with my lawyer. What I want to know is if anyone here used the affair fog to get better divorce terms, and if so, how did you do it? My STBXW is clearly deep in the fog, but she can still see and talk to AP. I haven't worried her about it yet because it's a good distraction. What did people agree on that they didn't expect? If you have any tips on how to get through this time and keep her off balance, that would be great. Besides Grey Rock and 180, I've been going out much less often and not telling anyone what I'm doing. Update. Advice on maintaining a Grey Rock strategy during divorce proceedings. Hello everyone. The current situation in my life has been talked about in a few threads, but to give you a quick rundown, my wife cheated on me, I found out, and she told me the standard "I love you but I'm not in love with you" line. She then said that her affair partner was the deepest emotional connection she's ever had, which I thought was BS. After uncovering the full extent of her lies and manipulation, I decided to serve her with divorce papers, and now here we are, a few weeks into the post-serving phase. Due to the circumstances, we still have to live together temporarily, as I want to maximize the time I can spend with my children. I've moved into a separate room, which has allowed me to start establishing some much-needed emotional distance. To cope with the situation, I've implemented the Grey Rock technique with my soon-to-be ex-wife, aiming to keep my responses as bland and unengaged as possible. This helps to minimize any unnecessary drama or conflict. However, I do have to feign some interest during discussions, especially when the kids are around, because they're still quite young and sensitive to the tension in the house. I've also been deliberately making myself less available in the evenings, choosing instead to spend time with friends, focus on working out, or engage in other activities that keep me out of the house. I'm seeking any additional advice on how to navigate this delicate situation. It's hard because I want to keep good relationships with my kids and have even put up with family dinners and other activities we do together for their sake. But I'm also trying to take care of my own mental and emotional health. Are there any other do's and don'ts that could help me manage this process more effectively? Update 2. For those who don't know the story, I've written a few posts about it. Wife cheated, strongest emotional connection ever, love you but not in love, etc. As of now, it's been just over 1.5 months since D-Day and I'm working like crazy to move on. This post isn't meant to give you any new information. I can only say that the process is still going on and that I will let you know when it's time, which will probably be a while from now. If you've been through the process, please share any good tips, lessons learned, things you would have done differently, or news that would be helpful. The tips in the earlier posts have been very useful, and the people who have called out in other ways have been amazing. I'm writing to see if there is anything else I can do to help. Update. She cheated, but somehow I'm the one being made to feel like an asshole. Hey everyone. You can find the details of my situation in my previous posts, but to give a brief summary. My wife cheated on me and found what she calls her greatest emotional connection in some worthless guy. I took action and filed for divorce, and now the process is in full swing. What I'm really looking for here is advice from those of you who have dealt with being painted as the villain by in-laws, friends, or even within your own family, despite being the one who was wronged. After I filed for divorce, I made sure to inform some of the in-laws, as well as my own family and close friends, but I didn't go around broadcasting the details to everyone. I wanted to keep things somewhat private. However, I'm aware that my soon-to-be ex-wife has likely spun her side of the story to others. Since then, I've noticed that I'm getting cold vibes from quite a few of her family members and some mutual acquaintances. While I understand that people tend to side with blood, it's incredibly disheartening when your own family members turn their backs on you, even when you've done your best to be a good father and husband, while she's the one who has acted immorally. My question is, did any of you find that people eventually came around and realized the truth of the situation? Or did you just stop caring and move on? How did you handle it when those close to you seemed to believe her side of the story? Or when they treated you like the bad guy despite the reality of what happened? Any insights or shared experiences would be greatly appreciated. Update 3. Hello everyone. As of today, I'm finally starting to see some closure in the saga that began earlier this summer. Over the past few months, I've been sharing my journey and seeking advice from this community, and I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude for the incredible support and guidance I've received. I especially want to thank those of you who reached out to me privately, offering words of wisdom during this incredibly difficult time. Going through this process has been challenging, particularly because my close family is far away. It's tough to be left alone with your thoughts, but I've found that there is some valuable wisdom and introspection to be gained in moments like these. For those who may need a brief recap, here is the summary. My wife cheated on me and tried to keep it hidden. When I discovered the truth, I realized there was no hope for reconciliation because she was too deeply entangled in her affair with the other man. As a result, I immediately filed for divorce. Over the past few months, things have been cold and distant between us, but relatively free of drama as we work to separate our lives within the same house while still fulfilling our responsibilities as parents. The discovery and mediation process moved along fairly quickly. We were able to reach an agreement on a 50-50 custody arrangement for our children, complete with schedules and holidays. Since we live in a no-fault state, the division of assets followed the legal guidelines, with some room for negotiation. I will not go into too much detail right now, and perhaps I will share more in a future post, but I am currently in the process of finding a new place where I can start fresh. The final conclusion is on the horizon, and for the most part, the divorce is nearly complete. Reflecting on this whole ordeal, I have learned quite a few things that I would like to share with others who might be going through something similar. First, do not waste your time with the so-called pick-me dance. I tried it for about a week before I woke up to the reality of her cheating. My soon-to-be ex-wife is still stuck in her delusion, but that is her choice, and she has to live with the consequences. Second, it is crucial to hire a competent family law attorney who understands your goals and can help you navigate the legal realities. I cannot praise my attorney enough for guiding me through this process and helping me reach a fair settlement without incurring outrageous fees. I did a lot of the preparatory work myself, which minimized the back and forth and allowed us to settle things rather quickly. Third, lean on your friends and family as much as possible for support. It makes a world of difference. Fourth, maintaining your mental health is key, and exercise has been a lifesaver for me. I started hitting the gym about a month after discovering the affair, and the physical and mental benefits have been instrumental in helping me stay strong throughout this ordeal. Fifth, seek individual counseling and talk to someone you trust. This has been incredibly helpful for me in processing everything. Finally, I've come to realize through reading countless posts and comments that the decisions of a cheater are entirely their own. My soon-to-be ex-wife gave me all the excuses. I felt like we were just roommates. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Our marriage went off track. You work too much, and on and on. But the truth is, after piecing together the timeline, I now understand that our marriage started to unravel when she allowed someone else into her life who fed her lies and stroked her ego, giving her the extra attention she craved. To justify her actions in her mind, She had to build walls between us and make me out to be the bad guy. Sure, she might have been stressed from the demands of raising kids, managing daily life, and sustaining a long-term marriage, but turning to someone who has already been through 2 divorces and has no moral compass was entirely her choice, and it was a recipe for disaster. What's next? The last part of my soon-to-be ex-wife's affair is still in writing, but I think that bad decisions always have bad results. That's all I have to say about it for now. I want to thank everyone who has helped me through this from the bottom of my heart. I still have a lot of work to do, but I'm also excited about all the new experiences that this next part of my life will bring. I hope I can help someone else in the future. Please don't be afraid to ask for help if anyone here needs it. I'm here for you. Update. Has your ex tried to stay involved in your life even after the divorce? I have a question for the group. My post history provides the details of what I call the greatest emotional connection love story ever. Ha! I'm getting closer to moving into my own place, as I have a couple of kids with my soon-to-be ex-wife, and I've also had to stay in our marital home for legal reasons during this process. I've shared a few other threads about this ongoing saga, but fortunately, the light at the end of the tunnel is now in sight. Obviously, I will need to co-parent with my ex, and I am committed to being civil for the sake of our children. However, I have made it clear that she destroyed our marriage, and with that, any possibility of a friendship as well. I have no room in my life for someone who is a lying cheater. Despite this, she has been quite persistent about wanting to remain involved in my life, offering to help decorate my new house and suggesting we keep holiday traditions intact for the kids. Once again, I have stood firm, reminding her that she is the one who chose to ruin our relationship, effectively replacing me, and I'm simply granting her that wish. I've even told her outright that she won't be welcome in my new home. Has anyone else experienced their ex trying to stick around after the divorce? I can't help but think it's an attempt to maintain appearances, as if being friends would somehow make the split seem less severe. So far, her affair partner has not made an appearance, and she's been trying to keep that under wraps, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time before their so-called greatest emotional connection is brought into the open. I have absolutely no desire to be in the same room with either of them, but I'll be ready to watch from the sidelines when that whole mess inevitably blows up. Thanks, as always, to this incredible group for your support. Update 4. As of today, the official decree has been issued and I am no longer married. I also picked up the keys to my new house and will begin the moving process as soon as possible. I opted for a buyout because I felt it was best to start fresh in a place of my own, where I can create new memories. I'm delighted to report that I was really fortunate to find a well-kept house with a large fenced-in backyard, a wood fire pit, a roomy garage, and a prime position just a minute from my existing residence. The property even backs up to a nature preserve, which is perfect for me as an avid outdoorsman and hiker. It gives me direct access to my own little paradise. Some might wonder why I chose to stay so close. The answer is simple. I want to be near my kids because they need to know their dad is close by whenever they need me. Following the advice of this community, I kept my focus on what truly matters, started a workout program, and also dived headfirst into a new career opportunity, which has already paid off in a big way. I haven't spent time worrying about the past or seeking out a new relationship. Instead, I plan to enjoy the single life for a while. My priority is my 2 young kids, and I am fully committed to focusing on them and my personal growth. As for my ex and her affair partner, I've reached a point where I can honestly let go of that mess. Whatever happens between them will happen, and it's no longer my concern. As someone wisely pointed out, when you end up with someone who cheated on their spouse, you're getting someone who is capable of cheating on their spouse. I know I did my best as a husband and father, and now it's time for someone else to appreciate what I have to offer. I want to extend my thanks to everyone who has sent me messages, offered advice, well wishes, and more. My life has depended on this support during these past few months when I didn't have many people nearby to lean on. For those who are just starting down this difficult path, please keep putting one foot in front of the other and take it day by day. I'm not claiming to be an expert in life, but I'm always here if anyone needs someone to talk to. Good luck, y'all. Update. After getting divorced, a lot of big things have happened in my life, mostly good things. I'll have a report on my life soon. So now that I have more time on my hands, I've looked back and seen the life I had planned fall apart. I don't understand how this could have happened so quickly. There has been a lot of time for everyone to think about the who, what, why, and why. But when I look back, I see that my WS and I had a great life ahead of us. We have a home, 2 beautiful children who are no longer in diapers, and the money for their college is being paid for, among many other good things. Their careers are going well after some hard work to get them started. Thinking about this is the last thing that's stopping me, But I really don't get how someone with so much going for them would choose to trash it all and go all in on a serial cheating turd. Do I really need to say it again? Hey, this group? I know it will take me a while to get over this, but when I think about our past and present lives together, I wonder how someone could be so selfish and stupid. I know that the things we want can't be changed, but damn, the whole point of being married is to work through things together and fall in love with each other all the time. Once more, thanks to this great group for all the ideas. I know I say this a lot, but these boards have been great for getting this stuff off my chest. Update 5. Hey everyone, to those who just got through D-Day and are afraid about what life might be like now, I wanted to give you a quick update. I moved into my new place a month ago and have been working like crazy to make it my sanctuary. It's been 6 weeks since the ruling. It feels like home to me now that I have everything I need. My kids have been over a lot of times now, and the switch works well. I've read a lot of times that kids are strong, but it's scary until you see it for yourself. I'm glad to say that they're doing pretty well. We have fun at their dad's house, and they've told me many times that they love being over. For me, having more freedom has been strange at first, but making to-do lists and setting daily, weekly, and long-term goals has helped a lot. I used to be sad, but being busy takes that away. Right now, I'm only thinking about how to improve myself. I've thought about getting back into the scene, but I really don't want to. Instead, I'm focusing on home improvement, exercise, and my kids. Someone said on one of my posts that leaving the house was like coming up for air after being underwater. They were right. I'm nice to my cheating ex, but that's it. There's been no sign of the best emotional link AP yet, WTF, but who cares? Just so you know, I sat outside tonight with a cigar and a few beers and enjoyed the peace and quiet of my property. I thought, getting the hell away from the situation my ex put me in was the right thing to do. It is the hardest, most upsetting and most annoying thing in the world, but I think it will get better over time. In the meantime, I had to kick a cheater out. Cheers everyone. Update. Hi all, another update from AC 496 once again. Thank you all, you wonderful people, for the comments and support. It's now month 2 of being on my own. My house is coming together quite nicely. My kids have been doing very well and making memories, and I have some fun trips planned in the near future. As per the usual advice, I have kicked my weight training and diving into the next gear and furnished my home gym with some better equipment and also been hitting the heavy bag very regularly. It must be working because during my monthly therapy session, my counselor told me it was great to see progress in both my mental and physical health. That was a nice little boost that things are going in the right way. I have not bothered to date, as look at this point it's early on, and I'm just enjoying the free time, new projects, and time with friends. As the title of the post suggests, has bad luck been falling to bad people? Actually, I don't have a great post ready yet that goes into great depth about how OM and the EXU were destroyed. There is one strange thing though, the best love story ever hasn't been told at all, and OM is still a secret. I wanted to ask, why could this be? Is my ex-wife just playing image management and waiting to reveal all at a time that looks better? But isn't the thrill of the affair dead now that they can't sneak around? I'm no longer around, so I just find it odd. I have a feeling they are still communicating. She makes it obvious she is by hiding her phone still if I'm around during kids' activities. But why? It's like, you wanted this, you snuck around, and claimed this was the most amazing thing ever. Why not blast it out now that the horrible ex-husband is gone? Has this happened to anyone else with their ex and AP? Update 5. Hey everyone, it's almost been 6 months since my split and almost a year since D-Day. Writing this has helped me feel better, but I know that many people have been reading it, responding, contacting me, giving me hope and so on. I've also written this to show the new people who have joined this community that there is another side to the darkness they have entered. Like always, I hope I can help people in need in any small way I can. I'm very grateful for the help I received, and I would always love to return the favor. This is how things are now, 6 months after D-Day. My house is furnished and feels like a home. My kids are used to the schedule and love having friends over. And I've made some new friends in the neighborhood. I'm so grateful that the kids handled this so well. They know that there's dad time and mom time, and they don't complain or cry when they're not here. I'm really into making a crap ton of changes to my house. When I moved in, the house was already filled by an older, divorced man. Some things were left behind, but I see that as a chance to make it my own. Along with that, I set up a home gym with all the equipment I need. I'm now working out and fighting 4 times a week, which is helping my body get back to where it needed to be after this whole thing. At my current job, I also made a big career move and somehow didn't mess anything up. In fact, I got praise for it. I've kept my situation a secret, gotten a raise, and gotten a lot of attention to move up in my job. Yes, I still have problems with my mental health and focusing every day, but I deal with them by going to therapy and working out, and things are getting better. It makes me feel better every day to think about my ex less and less. She's still in dreamland, but I think we do a pretty good job of co-parenting. If she says, let's be friends, I gray rock the heck out of that, but only with kids, and everyone has been nice. I'm sure that everyone who has been following my story has been curious about the story of OM. For now, I can only say that the world's best love story hasn't gone live. However, my kids recently told me that he has been around in a small way. I can't help but laugh because it's been 6 months since D-Day and they're still sneaking around. These are all great signs of a trusted relationship that will last. After realizing that whatever is going to happen will happen, I feel lucky to be away from someone who is willing to lie to their most trusted partner and not feel bad about it. I now have a good chance of making my life even better than it was before. Goodbye and have a nice day. Anyway, that is all for now, and I want to extend yet another big thank you to everyone who follows, comments, and sends rays of hope. I will continue to provide updates and offer support as always. Update. Hi y'all, I wanted to share some thoughts from a great conversation I had with a friend last night over several beers. It's amazing how the world's problems can sometimes feel a little more manageable on a Friday night. For some background, my friend went through a divorce 7 years ago. There are so many strange parallels between our situations, even down to the fact that the birthdays of our ex-spouses are the same. I've mentioned in recent posts that the full extent of the situation with my ex and the other man is gradually becoming clearer. Although I keep contact with my ex to a minimum, my kids sometimes make comments that are hard to ignore. But, it is what it is. Anyway, my friend noticed that I was feeling a bit frustrated and shared something with me that really put things into perspective. He said, think about their lives for a second. Here you have 2 cheaters who ended up together. Just imagine how pathetic that other guy is for manipulating a married woman with children. Now consider this, they have to make it work, no matter how miserable it gets. Meanwhile, you or I, if we meet someone and it doesn't go well, we can move on without much fuss. But them? They're stuck. He has to live in the house you built, deal with your kids, and inherit your selfish ex and her in-laws. They have no choice but to make it work, or else they'll look foolish. Can you imagine what kind of hell that must be? But you're free. I spent some time thinking about that this morning, and it really helped me see things differently. What an awful future they have to look forward to. I just wanted to share this perspective and see if anyone else has reached a similar conclusion or witnessed this dynamic in action. As always, thank you all for being such an incredible source of support. You all are amazing. Update 7. The affair partner is invited to my child's birthday. Hi everyone, AC 496 here. I want to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to this wonderful group, as always. I have something on my mind that I need to share. For those who are familiar with my story, I've been making good progress, and I have some significant updates coming soon. I enjoy sharing positive milestones in my journey to help others who are going through similar situations. However, right now, I'm in need of some advice. Here's the situation. My daughter's birthday is coming up this weekend. Last weekend, we had a small party with my family to celebrate. It wasn't anything fancy, but my daughter loved the cake and gifts. This weekend, my ex-wife is having her normal look at how great I am party. It was sent to me, but I just now learned that the other man, the affair partner, is going to be there. Even though I told my ex-wife that this was wrong, she didn't bother to answer. The party is being held at the house that used to be mine, so many of her co-workers, family, and friends will also be there. Many of them knew about the affair. It feels like enemy territory to me. This whole situation is awful, especially since it's supposed to be a celebration for my daughter after the divorce, and I can't shake the feeling that it's all a setup. After discussing this with some other supportive members here, it really feels like I'm walking into a pit of vipers. The only thing that comes to mind is showing up well dressed, with a fresh haircut, and flaunting the results of my hard work at the gym. But honestly, even with that plan, I'm not comfortable with the situation. It feels like my ex-wife is being highly manipulative, knowing exactly how to push my buttons and hoping I'll react in some petty way. I could really use some advice on how to handle this situation. Any thoughts or suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Update. Wow, the responses have been awesome. You guys are all awesome. I will try and respond to each and every one when my day calms down. Update 8. Hey everyone. I want to start by thanking all of you for the overwhelming support I received on my post earlier this week. From the beginning of this ordeal, this community has been my lifeline, providing advice and encouragement that have helped me navigate through everything. I truly cannot express how much it means to me. Now, on to the juicy update, and trust me, this one is worth it. So, I initially told my ex-wife that I would be attending the party. What I didn't tell her though, was that I had changed my mind. I waited until Saturday morning to swing by the house and drop off a card and present for my daughter. To my surprise, the kids had been taken to their grandparents' house for the morning. As I pulled into the driveway in my sports car, I noticed that the other man's pathetic vehicle was parked on the side of the road. I casually walked into the backyard with a smile on my face, catching both my ex-wife and the other man completely off guard as they were setting up decorations. The look of absolute fear on their faces was priceless, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that the other man couldn't even make eye contact with me. All he could manage was a weak, "Oh hey man," which honestly made me laugh. At that very moment, I didn't feel angry. I just felt very sorry for them. I told them good luck because I know they'll need it. Is that growing as a person? I stayed calm and simply said, "I'm here to give my daughter her present, but I won't be joining the party." My ex-wife was visibly shocked and, in the sweetest voice I've ever heard from her, practically begged me to stay. I just replied, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'll head over to your parents' place to give my daughter her gift." And then I left. On my way out, I couldn't resist giving the other man a casual, "See you later, bro," before walking away with my head held high. Not even 3 minutes passed before my ex-wife called me, once again pleading for me to come to the party, but I stood my ground and politely declined. After giving the gift a few minutes later, I went to my ex-in-law's house to play with my kids for a short time and then left without saying anything about what happened. As for me, I kept myself busy for the rest of the day. I did some work around the house, got in a much-needed workout, and even went on a date. While the date didn't really go anywhere, she was nice, and at the very least it was a good distraction. My daughter thanked me for the gift I gave her today, but she didn't even ask why I wasn't at the party. As everyone here said, she was too busy having fun to notice. So that's how it all went down. I know that if I had gone to the party, it would have set me back emotionally, and for no good reason. Instead, my ex-wife told everyone I would be there, and with me not showing up and the other man being there, I'm pretty sure people figured out the reason. Now I can enjoy the rest of my weekend without feeling mentally drained and maybe even have a little fun. Update. Hey everyone, this will be a short but rather amusing update to my previous posts. The amount of support I received was incredible, and I want to thank you all for your advice. I'm still smiling from the clever move I pulled off last week. I've had a really good week since then, so here's a little Friday humor for you. To give you some context, since the day I discovered the affair, those who have been following my journey may recall that my in-laws completely cut me off. I understand family loyalty and all that. However, one member of the extended family has continued to reach out, and we've been hanging out regularly. He is truly a man of character. So on Saturday during the party, I got a text from him that said, "Hey man, let's grab some beers this week. Your presence is missed here." Fast forward to a few days later. We met up, started drinking some beers, and got down to discussing what happened. He began by telling me about the awkward mess that the party turned out to be, with people clearly avoiding eye contact and feeling uncomfortable. Apparently, the other man wasn't introduced to anyone, and my ex-wife kept her distance from him during the entire event. Instead, she mostly busied herself with telling him what to do. Meanwhile, my in-laws didn't even bother to talk to him and mostly kept to themselves, looking pretty annoyed. He was clearly out of place and ended up going inside for most of the time, avoiding nearly everyone. There was even a quiet remark among some of the in-laws on my ex-wife's side that the whole thing was pretty classless. I have to admit, I'm slowly moving toward indifference, but I couldn't help but laugh. My absence was clearly understood, and the fact that I had already given my daughter her gift was well known, so it seems like the family fully grasped why I wasn't there. Mission accomplished. Anyway, that's my bit of Friday humor. For those of you who are just beginning to navigate your own tough situations, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of taking the high road, acting with dignity and class, and focusing on living your best life. It may not be the most immediately satisfying choice, but much like weight training, the results take time and are absolutely worth it. Happy Friday, y'all. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. My parents told my brother he could have my house, and I should live in the camper in the backyard since I'm single and he has a family. 1 hour story. Post on January 23, 2023, begins in 2020. November 2022. I'll warn everyone here that this is going to be very long. So long that I'm splitting it into 2 posts and including a summary for each. I don't really care who believes this. It's just so crazy that I don't blame anyone who calls it false. I won't argue about it. But this happened to me. I also don't care if anyone in my family sees this. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. But I'm also not going to reveal any details that would clue anyone into who I am that doesn't already know me. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I have a brother who's 29, and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22, and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that. And the fourth was born a couple of months ago. His wife, my sister-in-law, and I do not get along as she always tries to provoke me by acting superior. Then she turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliate in any way. She can cry in an instant and put on a very convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that. But she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house. And privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything unless people called them out on it. Which did happen a fair bit by other family members. This is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically abusive towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had. And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equally to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy, and loved gossiping and drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on, and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out. But couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was in low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation. But I didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start of the 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job, and couldn't renew the lease on my condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all of my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life. Until then, life wasn't kind to me. And I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply because I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally hoped to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it'd cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park my camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could until I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And sister-in-law thought it was absolutely hilarious that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck/camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were apartment people. And I was pretty attached to my area as well. So I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. At that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts, to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point someone who told me to move claimed to be with a homeowners association. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned what homeowners association, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. To have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone. But I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and require fuel anyway. So I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again. Though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money. But I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse in old employee parking spaces literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get as long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at a friend's apartment, or at my local gym as the camper didn't have a shower in it, and only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse, and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with the night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have air conditioning, so I had to get a used portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay and learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor, and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property. But I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my Facebook. My family saw the post, and that's where this mess really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother along with his family came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address. So how they found out where I live I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like rambunctious tourists. Then they just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around and my sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why. And it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now. And it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. Sure, not now, but maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they'd planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone. And I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4. And my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes, and even curfews. And that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily. But certainly not him. Or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact kind of situation in videos online many times. And never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it so ludicrous. But my parents, brother, and sister-in-law do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic entitled crazies. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording. Then just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said, "Hell no." And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs. And acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it, won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total nonsense because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course, I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids, and I don't need all the space. So I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything. And he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this, and that I will. I yelled, as if their word was law or something, and told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then right on cue my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting. But to sum it up from this point on I heard the line, "Just do it for Dan," way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them all they don't have a say in my life or my house. And to get out before I called the cops. My sister-in-law screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again, and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her, she just assumed she could take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up person who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be, and to not come back. Then I told sister-in-law that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I'll press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and sister-in-law. I responded by telling her I won't be. Update 1, January 25, 2023. Part 2 of parents trying to take my house for my brother. They broke my locks to move in while I wasn't home. As I stated in the first half of my post, many will find this unbelievable and long. Yes, I am aware there are similar sounding posts online already. I've seen a number of them now. But it's not like those posters have a monopoly on this sort of situation happening to them. If anything, I'm surprised this site hasn't been better weaponized against this sort of thing since entitled people should be more afraid of getting outed here. But anyway, I do not blame anyone who calls this false. I would too if I was reading this. However, by reading this and my first post, you'll know just how messed up my parents are. As in my life they were the root of all evil that spoiled my brother into the person he is today. They have never given me a real reason for why. And I kind of fear there isn't one. Some people can't explain why they make choices like child favoritism. So it's all they can do to try and stand by the child they backed. Which is exactly what my parents tried to do. And I've practically destroyed their lives for it. Not in the legal sense, but more an emotional one. After I kicked my parents, brother and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately went to my social media and told the story to the whole family. It spread pretty fast, but you won't find it now because it all got deleted some time ago and I put my own profile in private. I posted about it because I knew that the first thing my family would do when they got home is try to twist the event to make me the villain. And I was exactly right. But I had about an hour to get started before them. And I had video evidence to back up my story about what they'd done. No, I don't plan on showing the video here, so don't ask. Being preemptive worked because I got a fair number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother and sister-in-law must have been all set to write their own post, but it was too late. So they didn't even bother trying to lie much. My parents, Dan and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys supporting them, but not much else. Plenty of others knew how entitled they already were. So what happened was something they all quickly understood and accepted. There was one person in particular that called me. I don't know who they were. But they ranted at me that I was a horrible brother and I needed to make way for a real family man. I just ended the call and blocked the number. This didn't repeat. The week went by and my parents showed up with Dan at my front porch just like they said they would in their prior ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and also pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened it just a crack, and they tried to shove their way in again. But I'd installed a couple of latch chains that prevented it and even braced my body against the door for good measure. My father and brother demanded I let them in. But I said I was recording everything on camera, and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down, and then in her most sickly sweet tone asked me if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told her and the rest of them to leave and never come back. My mother put on the crocodile tears and asked me why I can't just do this for Dan because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and then bluntly said I do not love him as a brother because he treated me terribly for years, and they only encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents, and he is a terrible brother. Then told them to leave or I'd be calling the police as soon as possible. They all left surprisingly easily, apart from my mother's loud crying and the others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over. But I guess I should have taken them more seriously, because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family there moving stuff in. He just waved to me with a smug grin when I saw him. I was furious and told him and the rest of his family to stop. But sister-in-law smugly said to me that like it or not, they were moving in. And then in the most fake way while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said that it was okay, because my mommy allowed it. And I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I seethed with rage just hearing those words and looking at her smug face. So I locked myself in my truck to call the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop. And that I can't do this to her because she and Dan need the house. And she cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" I responded with, "Forget Dan. It's my house, not his." Then she threatened to scratch the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police. All of which the 911 operator heard thanks to the window being slightly open. I told sister-in-law if she damaged my truck, I'd sue her. And she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan and sister-in-law along with their kids had locked themselves in my house. I told the cops what had happened, as well as showing them my new driver's license that had my current address on it. Then when we went to my front door, I saw that they'd changed the lock. And the old lock was laying on the porch with the center of it drilled out, and the drill they used was laying right next to it, with a complete Harbor Freight drill bit set. Could they have been any more stupid leaving evidence out like that? I pointed out the broken lock and drill, then gave the police a rundown on all the events that happened prior. Well, I guess Dan called our parents over at some point after I arrived home, because they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied and started saying that I'd agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I said that was an easily provable lie one way or another. So Dan and my sister-in-law finally came out of my house with some papers in hand. They both looked super smug, like they'd somehow outsmarted me. They'd actually drawn up and printed out a fake rental agreement. But my signature was not on it. There was one, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever actually seen my signature. So that was incredibly stupid on their part. I told my parents and Dan that it was blatant fraud. And if the cops investigated, they'd easily figure that out. And I don't think going to jail and court would do them any good. It could even make Dan lose his job, which is his only means of providing for his family. I also said I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost, stolen or broken. And I'd call Child Protective Services too for good measure. Dan went white and looked really scared when I said all that, but my mother got between us and doubled down about how I should just do this for Dan, and live in the camper so they can finally have a family home to themselves. I yelled at her that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could do it for Dan herself and let Dan have her house to himself instead. The cops separated my mother from me and I said I wanted them all out right now or I'll press charges. I stated in a shout about how they drilled out my front door lock to break in, the lease papers were obvious fakes, they badly forged my signature and I have recorded video of my sister-in-law attacking me. Those are felonies I could ruin their lives with if I wanted. And if they didn't leave, that's exactly what I'd do. The only reason I hadn't already was for the sake of Dan's kids. So they have one chance to get out. The moment my parents heard that, I think it finally clicked that they could not force me to do it for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she'd put an end to this. Then she went over to my sister-in-law and spoke with her quietly for a minute while my father spoke to Dan. My sister-in-law instantly started loudly crying and ripping up the fake rental papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, only to have an officer tell them to pick up the bits of paper or he'd cite them for littering. Both of the cops at this point had the "I don't get paid enough for this" looks on their faces. Dan had to start telling his kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, and the eldest was sobbing that he won't get his own room now. My sister-in-law and Dan gathered their kids up to try and make one last pathetic attempt to guilt me with the sad family routine. You know, where they all gather together in a sort of group hug while all facing one direction. I swear, I think they'd practiced it beforehand. All of the kids had the same pleading look with quivering mouths. My sister-in-law kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look like a sad puppy, and my brother just made the saddest face he possibly could and said, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't falter and told them to keep packing. All the kids and my sister-in-law turned the crying up to 11, and Dan yelled at me, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help our family." I ended up laughing like a maniac and retorting that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing. And no amount of crying will make me let his family move in because he's no brother of mine anymore. He's just an entitled person who thinks he can take whatever he wants from me like when we were kids. Dan started cursing at me until the cops told him to cool it or he'd be in cuffs regardless if I wanted to press charges. He sucked in his lips and looked a mix of afraid and supremely pissed off. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother and sister-in-law had all left. And they said they had no intention of going anywhere until this had been resolved. In fact, in the next few minutes 2 cops became 4 as more drove in for whatever reason. That gave my parents some extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock he'd put on my front door, though I got another lock the next day anyway because I didn't know if he had copies of the keys or not. He was really reluctant to hand them over. Then instead of handing them to me, he actually threw them down the street and into a storm drain while saying to go get them myself. But one of the cops scolded him for that and made him go get them. He had to pull the grate off just to get at them. And he got pretty dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he just grumbled then slammed them down into my hand. I then told them all to leave and never come back. My mother said I'd be disowned for this, as if that were some kind of threat to me. And I voiced that to them. Then in an overly sarcastic way I said something along the lines of, "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys where I always get treated terribly by you all anyway. Because Dan has always been your obvious favorite. You treated me so badly when I was growing up that if Dan ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So do like you always told me to do when I was mistreated by all of you and suck it up." My parents were floored after I said all of that. And the quartet of cops were looking pretty judgmental at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put nasty parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops. Because they'll likely not try anything really stupid then. My mother just started crying and walking away. My father just stood there looking like he wanted to hit me. And Dan just held his kids in defeat. Oh, and my sister-in-law was off having a tantrum in my front lawn. Soon enough they all formed a line handing out boxes and got their stuff out of my house. Nothing had been unpacked yet. So it all was taken out pretty quickly. But while doing it, my mother kept saying it wasn't too late, and I could still do it for Dan several times. Each time trying to bargain more and more to try to make me change my mind. She said that Dan could pay me rent if I let them stay. And when that didn't work, she said I could move back in with them to let Dan rent my house so I wouldn't have to share the building. I told her to shut up and keep packing boxes because I don't want Dan or his family around. I don't want his money, and I certainly don't want to live with him or my parents ever again after the way they treated me when I was a kid. Making a deal with my parents would be like making a deal with the devil to me. My sister-in-law ended up having another tantrum after hearing that and threw a box down, then sat on the ground to have a pity party because she didn't want to go back to sharing a house with my parents. And she just sat looking angry and sad there until everyone else was finished. She didn't even want to get up when it was time to leave. They finally got everything out of the house and into the truck. So before they left, I laid into my parents one last time about all of the stuff they put me through growing up. And with 4 cops being right there, they couldn't do much other than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on so many things that happened. And even pointed out how they couldn't just do something nice for me. Like letting me stay over with my camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Dan and my sister-in-law ridicule me and call me a bum. Well, who's the bum now? They wanted to kick me out of my own house so Dan could stay in it free of charge. Yet when I needed a place to go, they wanted to gouge me for more than I could afford just to park my camper when they knew I was out of the job. There were more extremely judgmental stares from the cops when I said all of that. So I put my parents on the spot one more time and asked them what I ever did other than being born to deserve being treated so badly. Because when I finally have a bit of success in life, they want to snatch it away from me for their favorite child since they'd rather I give everything to Dan and have nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money that I earned. I owed them nothing, and I won't be asking anything from them ever again. Because clearly I will never be anything more than a doormat or a cash cow in their eyes. I got no answers from them. They just stood there looking like fish out of water. So I continued ranting and asked them what in God's name made them think they were such good parents after all of that. My father was beet red. But more from embarrassment than anger this time. And my mother was crying that she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed that she is a horrible person. They all are. And I bet they'll go to hell for it too. They were awful people, and they all knew it. But if I'd called them out on all this stuff in private instead of in public, they'd just get mad at me and still act like I'm in the wrong. They'd just kept up the denial for so long that it became a part of who they are. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket to cry. And my father looked more defeated than I've ever seen him. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished putting everything back in the moving truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen. Not that I'd had a chance to get much furniture yet. I was lucky to even have a couch at that time. They all got back in their vehicles, and my sister-in-law just stood staring at me with malice until my brother finally got her to drive the minivan home. And as soon as they were all gone, I got back online again and spilled the beans about what happened. My parents were too embarrassed to even try and defend their actions this time. And while the family was somewhat split before this incident, it was now a landslide in my favor. Nearly all of the family has sided with me after this incident. And those who haven't simply aren't siding with anybody. No matter how much my parents previously tried the "we did it for Dan" line, no one listened anymore. So any remaining familial support they had is now gone. Many in the family who I expected wouldn't side with me, did. That includes the former flying monkeys. So I guess they've finally had enough. Around that time I offered to host half the family next Christmas Eve in my new house. My parents were not invited. Surprisingly, I wasn't blocked on my brother and sister-in-law's profiles. And I saw my sister-in-law had her 4th baby in early November. They are still living with my parents. I'm pretty sure they knew I was watching, because my sister-in-law kept making passive-aggressive posts every couple of weeks or so about not having enough space while living with my parents. Probably to see if she can still guilt me. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father up the wall because they aren't getting any peace and quiet in their old age with 3 rowdy, obnoxious kids, a mentally unstable sister-in-law, my golden child brother, and a newborn baby in the house all at once. Perhaps they could move into a camper in their own backyard and let Dan take over their house completely. They might get some peace then. Yeah, they could do that for Dan. There was supposed to be more. But this post got way too long. So I'll be posting part 3 later. Update 2, January 30th, 2023. November 2022, just after Christmas 2022. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law showed up to Christmas at my house when they knew they were unwelcome. I was trying to keep things to 2 posts. But I realized while compiling everything that part 2 was just too long. So I've divided it into part 3, For those who commented en masse to get cameras, I will when I can afford it. I am still in financial recovery from buying a house last year. And as far as I know, good cameras need a decent computer to record to. And I do not have anything more than a 3-year-old laptop that runs Windows 10. Yes, I am aware of doorbell cameras. That will be the first kind I get. For those who kept saying that I should have just gotten my brother and sister-in-law arrested, the only reason I did not was because they are parents. Their kids need them. And if Dan was arrested, he would likely lose his job. And without that, his family has no money. And my sister-in-law has a baby who is only months old right now. Neither of them need to end up in jail, but you do not need jail for revenge. Police can help, yes. But I got payback without filing a police report. Would I be this merciful again? More than likely not. And they know it. I decided to wait on making an account and posting until after the new year, just in case more stuff happened. And it did. As previous readers know, my sister-in-law was making passive-aggressive posts on social media that were obviously directed at me. Especially after my sister-in-law had her 4th baby in November. She was posting the same repetitive nonsense over and over again. She just found semi-clever ways of rewarding it. But she pretty much kept regurgitating that she was tired of living with my parents, that there is not enough space, she needs her own house, blah blah blah. I know I sound dismissive, but live through what I have with these people and you would be ready to sarcastically play tiny violins in front of them too. They are just that bad. And since I waited until January to make an account, more happened just like I thought. I stated before that I had invited half the family for a Christmas Eve party at my house. And everyone I invited all came, even though it was a fairly long drive of around 3 to 4 hours for them. But they wanted to come and show me their support. I was praised by them a lot for how hard I had worked to get a house on my own, and that they were sorry for everything I had gone through. I was asked why I did not just take my camper and drive the 3 hours back to them, instead of living pretty much homeless for so long. And I had to sheepishly admit that I was very attached to living around here, and I had my best employment opportunities in this area. My hometown does not have a lot of great job opportunities in my field, if any at all. And I wanted to make my own way as much as I could. An answer they overall accepted. We moved on to having a rather nice party. The best I had been in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of great Christmas albums. And I have to say, the one my uncle brought to Ray Charles was my favorite. He sings Christmas songs like no one else I have heard. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like for once I could just forget my past issues and enjoy the moment. But I would not be writing this if it had stayed that way. About 2 hours into the party, you know who showed up. My parents, brother and sister-in-law popped in trying to look all smiles. They did not even knock. Just walked right in my front door like they were meant to be there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay and said they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I got another chance to speak. And he said they do not deserve to be in my home or my life after the shit they tried to pull months earlier. And he was backed up by several other relatives. Mind you, this guy is my mother's brother. And he used to love her to pieces until he found out about the shit that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, mother's parents, as old as they are, hurriedly got in between us and said to my parents that if they want to make amends with me, it is far too soon. And they have never been more disappointed in them than they were this past year. They had hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time. But no one was fooled anymore. And they needed to make a serious effort to try and actually treat me like a son if they ever wanted to be in my life again. Then they turned to Dan and my sister-in-law, and said they have seen the repetitive nonsense my sister-in-law keeps posting about. They are tired of it and to just let it go already. My house will not become their new home. My sister-in-law went back to her old standard of crying and had a pity party about how she should be the one living here and not me. She plopped down in a chair to have a tantrum and said it was not fair I got this house to myself when I have no family of my own, and she has 4 kids that need more space. And she just wanted a better place to live in and feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucks as a mother because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she sits on her butt all day drinking, playing on her phone or going out and spending all of Dan's money. And she has the nerve to complain about it. I even joked that I'm surprised her baby does not get drunk from her breast milk since she drinks so much booze. Which I admit went a bit too far as I got some stares. And my sister-in-law demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself. And if she wants to be able to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, then she needs to put her college degree to some use, get a job, and learn to save money. My mother already does most of the childcare for my brother's kids anyway. So she will have plenty of time after her baby gets a little older. My brother's eldest kid, who is 7 years old, ran up to start kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom. And he kept telling me about how his mom said that I was the bad guy who made her cry and did not let them live here. That is when my brother grabbed his son to pull him away. But all the other relatives jumped back in, and this sort of turned into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and brother. She was crying. Her new baby was crying. Her kids were crying. Hell, even Dan was very nearly in tears from the verbal lashing he was being assaulted with. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman I keep shoes in by the front door and looking like a complete wreck. He could not look anyone in the eye. He could not even say 2 words to me. Not with a whole house filled with angry people ready to judge him if he tried to let out his inner golden child again. If they were not there to get in his way, I would bet this would have ended up a repeat of when he tried to order me around to try and take my house months earlier. By this point, though, he had been so thoroughly humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were all off now. Soon after, my parents, brother, and sister-in-law all left in defeat. The party resumed and we all avoided speaking of what just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night in my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper so there would be enough space. I admit, it also makes a good guest house. My relatives all wanted a tour of it earlier as well. And they said they could not believe I had been living in it for around 2 years. I have a lot of questions about it. Like what summer and winter were like and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else on Christmas morning, and had a fresh pot of coffee and some ibuprofen for those spiked eggnog hangovers a few of them had. I was complimented on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas, my sister-in-law did finally stop making posts that were obvious digs at me and deleted all of the old ones as well. But shortly after the new year, she more recently made a new post complaining about how she had tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I did, so it could be set up in the backyard so Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. Well, a taste of one's own medicine is never fun. Because my parents turned that idea down, vehemently I hear. No one is going to push them out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was only up for a couple of days before my sister-in-law removed it. And she has hardly posted anything since then. She loves to complain. But if a tree falls and no one is around to hear it, can it still complain? My sister-in-law, I guess, has realized there is no point in doing it when no one hears her anymore. And Dan cannot afford to move his family out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they end up expecting another child in the next few years, I will not be surprised. Things have mellowed down for me since then. And I have even invited friends over for a poker night. I suck at poker because I can never remember a damn thing about it. But so what? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while being merry idiots. We all loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had at it the best way 4 grown men can when they just want to have a good unadulterated time and get piss drunk. I think maybe around summer I will look into possibly dating someone. I am not exactly getting younger here. Fingers crossed that goes well. My camper just sits idle in my yard now. And I admit, there were some days I went out there just to spend time in it. I did live in it for 2 years. It is like my second home. And maybe one day I will actually get to use it for camping, like it was meant to be. I have never been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time. So it would be a completely new experience for me. This pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law have all been staying very clear of me. In fact, they seem to have gone back to acting like I do not exist, like they did before I bought a house. Not like that bothers me at all. It is better that way. But they will inevitably come back in some way. I know they will. I just wonder what kind of stupid thing they will do next. If anything notable like all this ever happens again, I will make another post if this account is still active. Update 3, February 20th, 2023. Winter 2023. Sometime later in 2023. My parents and Dan were back sooner than I thought. And they wanted money this time. This will not surprise some people who commented on my previous posts because my parents did some of the exact things they said they would. They wanted either my money or my signature. I did expect the classic lines of narcissists saying that I owed them or giving me some kind of socialist nonsense about sharing the wealth. But that was just my imagination running wild. The ensuing situation was somewhat similar to that but much more tame, I guess you could say. They seemed to know not to push me too far now and were mostly aiming for pity. It began when my parents recently got in touch with me through social media and asked for a meeting in a public place of my choosing. It just screamed trap. But I was not afraid. In fact, I was amused. They know I am not to be messed with anymore. So I could only wonder what they wanted this time. I picked a local restaurant that may have the name of an olive and a garden in it, and we met up there. Dan was with them, but he kept his mouth shut most of the time. We had awkward greetings, ordered some drinks, and then cut to the chase. My parents begged me to help Dan get his own apartment so he could finally move out. Apparently, Dan's credit is not so great. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that his wife regularly puts him into a hole? Well, they asked that I help by either supplying some capital or co-signing for the apartment and helping to pay the rent for it. I simply said no to both. That is when Dan spoke up in anger and yelled at me that I have so much, and I do not have a family to support like he does. He needed my help and I should be sparing the money for his family since I do not have one myself. I laughed and asked where they were when I needed their help. Oh, that is right. They were pointing and laughing at me for being homeless. Or should we go further back to my childhood? I would love to delve into that with plenty of ears to listen in around us. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me not to speak of any of it. My father and Dan both just looked away and said nothing. Pretty sure they wanted to say something like they used to at me, but held their tongues. I asked them if they thought I was rich or something. And their looks said it all. And when I told them I do not have that kind of money, they looked at me like deer in headlights. I broke it down about how much I had managed to save for the down payment on my house and the way I had to live and work in order to save that much so fast. And then how I spent nearly all of it on the down payment of my house. I am still in financial recovery. I did have monthly income to spare, yes, but most of it was going right into my savings. I asked Dan what his yearly salary was, and when he told me, I pointed out that it was actually a bit higher than mine. I then loosely broke things down in rough math in front of my parents on how about 70% of my income goes to my mortgage, insurance, gasoline, internet, phone, food, and other bills. And then there is maybe 30% of that left at most that I can put into savings. And I need that money saved to get back on my feet in time. And I have to make sure I have savings to fall back on. My truck is from the 1990s. If it were to break down, I would need money to either fix or replace it. And there are other things one would need a rainy day fund for, like home repairs, doctors, taxes, lawyers, or anything in general you would need quick cash for when it is a sudden unexpected expense. So as you can see, I just cannot spare money for Dan. And I also refuse to co-sign for anything as that would leave me on the hook for any bill Dan could not or would not pay. Then I pointed out that that is likely why my parents did not co-sign for Dan's apartment themselves long ago. And my mother just started crying again. I was pretty much one step ahead of them in all of this. I am not an ATM and I am not a fool, and I stated that right to their faces. I expected my father to become angry with me like he always does. But this time he just, well, did not. I have known this man to explode on me for the slightest provocation of not enabling my brother all of my life. But this time he just did not do that. There was not even a sneer on his face. The only way I could describe the look he had was regret and defeat. Maybe regret for being a terrible parent. Or maybe regret because he cannot bully me around anymore. Who knows? Either way, my parents could not really argue with me, and I was not about to give them any money. Dan just got up and said this was all just a waste of their time, and that he was leaving. My mother started apologizing for him, but Dan still wanted to leave. Then just to kill with kindness I offered to buy them a round of unlimited soup and salad while we were all there. I guess they could not turn down free food since we had not ordered anything but drinks yet, and they stayed. I went out of my way to talk about anything other than money. Dan remained quiet, and was either eating his food or looking at his phone. But my parents just awkwardly talked with me. They brought up that they have recently joined a local Christian church, and that they had already been going for the last 2 weeks. I said good for them, and they of course started trying to advertise that they would like me to go too. I simply said no thanks, and they were smart enough not to push further. When the meal was finished, Dan left a $10 bill on the table for the tip and walked off without saying another word to me or anyone. My mother just excused his behavior and we all parted ways. That was about it. Not nearly as much drama as I thought there would be. But this is still far better than how things used to be with my parents and brother. As for my sister-in-law, well, she has been regularly complaining online about my parents. She really does not seem to like the fact that she is not the queen bee of their house. And I think her toxicity is finally getting to them. Why else would they be so desperate to come crawling back to me? My sister-in-law actually wants my parents to move into a camper like I had to do in order to make space in the house. And she is being told no, every time. She does seem to have a following of like-minded people like her though. Because here and there I get messaged by someone I do not know, that is intent on raging at me for not giving up my house for my sister-in-law. I do not bother to argue with these people anymore. I just block and move on. Though there was one persistent troll who had my phone number. And they call from a different number every time. Yes, it seems to be the same person who called me to say I need to make way for a real family man like Dan. But I could care less. The calls, though, seem to have slowed down, if not maybe stopped. Because I made it clear to that person that they were only amusing me by keeping this up so long. The last time they called was around the beginning of the month. And it has been silent from them since then. Update 4, October 5th, 2023. My parents and Dan were back sooner than I thought. And they wanted money this time. This will not surprise some people who commented on my previous posts because my parents did exactly what was expected. They wanted either my money or my signature. I did expect the classic lines of narcissists saying that I owed them or giving me some kind of socialist nonsense about sharing the wealth. But that was just my imagination running wild. The ensuing situation was somewhat similar to that but much more tame, I guess you could say. They seemed to know not to push me too far now and were mostly aiming for pity. It began when my parents recently got in touch with me through social media and asked for a meeting in a public place of my choosing. It just screamed trap. But I was not afraid. In fact, I was amused. They know I am not to be messed with anymore. So I could only wonder what they wanted this time. I picked a local restaurant that may have the name of an olive and a garden in it, and we met up there. Dan was with them, but he kept his mouth shut most of the time. We had awkward greetings, ordered some drinks, and then cut to the chase. My parents begged me to help Dan get his own apartment so he could finally move out. Apparently, Dan's credit is not so great. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that his wife regularly puts him into a hole? Well, they asked that I help by either supplying some capital or co-signing for the apartment and helping to pay the rent for it. I simply said no to both. That is when Dan spoke up in anger and yelled at me that I have so much, and I do not have a family to support like he does. He needed my help and I should be sparing the money for his family since I do not have one myself. I laughed and asked where they were when I needed their help. Oh, that is right. They were pointing and laughing at me for being homeless. Or should we go further back to my childhood? I would love to delve into that with plenty of ears to listen in around us. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me not to speak of any of it. My father and Dan both just looked away and said nothing. Pretty sure they wanted to say something like they used to at me, but held their tongues. I asked them if they thought I was rich or something. And their looks said it all. And when I told them I do not have that kind of money, they looked at me like deer in headlights. I broke it down about how much I had managed to save for the down payment on my house and the way I had to live and work in order to save that much so fast. And then how I spent nearly all of it on the down payment of my house. I am still in financial recovery. I did have monthly income to spare, yes, but most of it was going right into my savings. I asked Dan what his yearly salary was, and when he told me, I pointed out that it was actually a bit higher than mine. I then loosely broke things down in rough math in front of my parents on how about 70% of my income goes to my mortgage, insurance, gasoline, internet, phone, food, and other bills. And then there is maybe 30% of that left at most that I can put into savings. And I need that money saved to get back on my feet in time. And I have to make sure I have savings to fall back on. My truck is from the 1990s. If it were to break down, I would need money to either fix or replace it. And there are other things one would need a rainy day fund for, like home repairs, doctors, taxes, lawyers, or anything in general you would need quick cash for when it is a sudden unexpected expense. So as you can see, I just cannot spare money for Dan. And I also refuse to co-sign for anything as that would leave me on the hook for any bill Dan could not or would not pay. Then I pointed out that that is likely why my parents did not co-sign for Dan's apartment themselves long ago. And my mother just started crying again. I was pretty much one step ahead of them in all of this. I am not an ATM, and I am not a fool. And I stated that right to their faces. I expected my father to become angry with me like he always does, but this time he just, well, did not. I have known this man to explode on me for the slightest provocation of not enabling my brother all of my life. But this time he just did not do that. There was not even a sneer on his face. The only way I could describe the look he had was regret and defeat. Maybe regret for being a terrible parent. Or maybe regret because he cannot bully me around anymore. Who knows? Either way, my parents could not really argue with me, and I was not about to give them any money. Dan just got up and said this was all just a waste of their time, and that he was leaving. My mother started apologizing for him, but Dan still wanted to leave. Then just to kill with kindness, I offered to buy them a round of unlimited soup and salad while we were all there. I guess they could not turn down free food since we had not ordered anything but drinks yet, and they stayed. I went out of my way to talk about anything other than money. Dan remained quiet and was either eating his food or looking at his phone. But my parents just awkwardly talked with me. They brought up that they have recently joined a local Christian church, and that they had already been going for the last 2 weeks. I said good for them, and they of course started trying to advertise that they would like me to go too. I simply said no thanks, and they were smart enough not to push further. When the meal was finished, Dan left a $10 bill on the table for the tip and walked off without saying another word to me or anyone. My mother just excused his behavior and we all parted ways. That was about it. Not nearly as much drama as I thought there would be. But this is still far better than how things used to be with my parents and brother. As for my sister-in-law, well, she has been regularly complaining online about my parents. She really does not seem to like the fact that she is not the queen bee of their house. And I think her toxicity is finally getting to them. Why else would they be so desperate to come crawling back to me? My sister-in-law actually wants my parents to move into a camper like I had to do in order to make space in the house. And she is being told no, every time. She does seem to have a following of like-minded people like her though. Because here and there I get messaged by someone I do not know, that is intent on raging at me for not giving up my house for my sister-in-law. I do not bother to argue with these people anymore. I just block and move on. Though there was one persistent troll who had my phone number. And they call from a different number every time. Yes, it seems to be the same person who called me to say I need to make way for a real family man like Dan. But I could care less. The calls, though, seem to have slowed down, if not maybe stopped. Because I made it clear to that person that they were only amusing me by keeping this up so long. The last time they called was around the beginning of the month. And it has been silent since then. Well, I figured I'd wait half a year or so after the original post to update everyone, but it ended up being longer than that. Yes, things did go bad again. But not really for me for the most part. I'm pretty much fine, if not almost unscathed since last Christmas, apart from the time my parents and Dan came to me for money, as my last post told, and a more recent confrontation between me and sister-in-law you will read about here. I did get a few cameras for my house, including a Ring doorbell in front. I did not tell my family about the cameras just in case. But thus far no one has attempted a break-in. I think the way I outed them all before scared them into leaving me alone, for the most part anyway. I've taken to renting out 2 of the rooms in my house. One to a close friend, the other to a friend of said close friend. Both have been fantastic tenants. They know to keep quiet and leave me alone most of the time, and even have small refrigerators they keep in their rooms so they do not need to keep any of their drinks in the main fridge. The deal I gave them on rent was too good for them to pass up. It increased my monthly income well. And even after taxes, I'm still monthly putting away some decent amounts in the bank since the rent money pays a good chunk of my monthly mortgage. You're all probably wondering how my parents, brother and sister-in-law took to me renting out those rooms to friends. Well, the answer is, not well. My father and Dan stayed out of it. But my sister-in-law freaked out, which made my mother come crying to me over how I could have rented those rooms to Dan and his family instead. We had a bit of an argument in which I pointed out for one thing, they fucking broke into my house before to try and steal it. She would not want to let someone who did that move in with her. Also, there was not enough room for me, Dan, and his entire family in my house. Not that I would ever share a roof with them anyway. It's a 3-bedroom, and a manufactured home no less. I have the master bedroom and its adjoining bathroom. That would have left only 2 small rooms for Dan, sister-in-law, and 4 kids. Not to mention they would be annoying to me all the time. Also, she knows very well I can't be around my sister-in-law because she intentionally antagonizes me. And they all mocked me when I was homeless before. Besides, my current tenants are both single guys in their 30s I get along with. My mother had some sobbing excuses for a while, but she finally let it go and admitted she was just desperate. Edit. Parents found out I was renting rooms out because my sister-in-law basically stalked me in some way. Then she told my parents, and then my parents contacted me. And then my mother came over to cry about it. Since then my parents have not bothered me once about the house. So things are good for me. My parents and Dan, not so much. It turns out my sister-in-law is a far worse person than even I thought. I already knew she was a gaslighting self-victimizing drama queen. But she sank even lower. Because Dan's youngest child turned out not to be his. Yeah, you all read that correctly. Sister-in-law had an affair. Which in retrospect is not all that surprising. And something a few people here totally called months ago. After being caught, the sister-in-law was ousted from the family. Dan just recently finished with his divorce. Which actually went in his favor since we thankfully live in an at-fault state. Dan also sued to get his name taken off the birth certificate of the youngest child and won. Basically, after the incident where my parents tried to force me to hand over my house, things got pretty tumultuous over at their house. Sister-in-law blamed me. A lot. She was convinced somehow that I had tons of money. Like I had won the lottery or something, and that I should share the wealth. Apparently, it was her idea that they come to my Christmas party because she hoped they could all try to get on my good side. It was also her idea to make my parents and Dan try to get money from me for an apartment. So it really burst her bubble when Dan and my parents informed her of how my finances actually were. For the longest time, she had Dan and my parents fully engulfed in her toxic mindset, and only fed their narcissism with her own. So her blaming me made the rest of them blame me. That is until what happened in front of the police when they tried to steal my house. That is when the downfall for my sister-in-law really started. My parents and Dan were apprehensive about coming to my Christmas party after the way I had outed them. But my sister-in-law convinced them to just throw together a few cheap gifts from what they could get at the last minute and just show up because he'd never throw us out once we're already there. Boy, was she wrong. She gambled on that plan, and with the complete blessings of everyone I had invited threw her and the rest of them out. Her plan, she no doubt thought, was the most clever thing ever, backfired in her face spectacularly. I guess being chewed out by family at my party not only wrecked my parents' reputation even more, it actually started a wake-up call for them to eventually not listen to my sister-in-law anymore. And as I said in my last post, my parents decided on going back to church. Perhaps because last year I had said they would probably go to hell for their actions. I cannot say that's the real reason. But you gotta admit, it would feel kinda satisfying if that was the case. Though my parents hadn't been to church in 2 decades before going back. While I don't think it's a bad idea that they're going to church, they need to understand that going doesn't just give them a do-over for all the shit they've done in the past. But I have a little faith they're at least trying, because my parents came to my house without Dan to personally apologize to me after they had seen an animated video of my first 3 posts. That's right, they have known about this Reddit account for a long time now. They also know everything I'm saying. Yes, they're unhappy about it. But I feel everyone here deserves an update since it's anonymous. For my parents and Dan though, watching an animated video of themselves and their own actions was a great way to make them see what kind of people they really are. And they came over to apologize to me later. I had never seen my father apologize like that to anyone. And the man is not a good actor. So this felt genuine. They fully acknowledged what they did to me, and how there's no excuse for any of it. They even described themselves as narcissists, and admitted the truth that they had wronged me very badly. Then they went on to blame my sister-in-law for a lot of things. Yeah, they kinda threw her under the bus. But it's not like she wasn't guilty of everything they said. My parents have been getting counseling for a while now too, and did offer group family counseling, but I declined as I'm not ready for that anytime soon. Dan himself didn't apologize to me for some time, but he looked extremely remorseful any time the past was brought up. Meanwhile, Dan and sister-in-law's marriage absolutely fell apart. It wasn't a crumble, it was a cascade. Without me as the scapegoat / black sheep / ATM that they couldn't mock or try to get money from anymore, and after the public humiliation of social media, my Reddit posts, and the animated online video, sister-in-law finally let out enough of her toxic on Dan and my parents for them to realize she's not the person they thought she was. Their denial had been strong, but my sister-in-law's entitlement was stronger. I've had many thoughts of lightsabers clashing over this drama. Sister-in-law clad like a bimbo Sith with a lightsaber that looks like a giant lipstick, or something like that. I imagine there's a wealth of puns and jokes to be had there. But I really didn't bother to think much more detail about it. But as you can imagine, things only got worse because my sister-in-law kept looking for other ways to get what she wanted. She kept bringing up ads for used campers and RVs to try and get my parents to buy one to live out of, so they could have the main house. And she kept doing this no matter how many times they told her to stop. She even tried to say my parents should just buy an RV and have a life on the road, like normal old people do. That was stupid, even for my sister-in-law. The opposite was suggested by my parents, that Dan and sister-in-law buy a camper themselves to live out of it instead. Sister-in-law basically said she shouldn't have to do that since she's the mom. She pretty much lorded the fact that she thought she had total parental authority over everyone's heads because the kids in the house were all hers. And when my sister-in-law didn't get her way, she actually took her baby and left the house to disappear for several days. They knew she was fine because her phone was still working, and she was responding to texts with short but passive-aggressive answers. And when she came back, she was only more embittered because nobody caved to her demands while she was away. Sister-in-law also refused to go to church. But Dan went with our parents and took his kids along as well, save for the youngest since my sister-in-law refused to let him take the baby anywhere, Personally, I don't go to church. I believe in God and all that stuff. But I just don't like church. Besides, it never did me any good growing up. Update 5. October 7th, 2023. Just so everyone understands, a lot of this information came from Dan and my parents. So I'm just telling what I know. Everything really hit the fan when Dan suddenly called out his wife as a cheater in March. This shocked us all because we thought he was a complete pushover to her. But no, he's not. At least not anymore. You all know how he treated me when I was on his bad side. Well, his wife wasn't spared that hire at all. He started putting pieces together about her deceit after finally pulling his head out of his ass and secretly got DNA tests for all his kids. 3 of the kids are his. But the youngest one, the baby, was not. For the record, Dan and I both have pretty dark straight hair that's almost black. Same with our parents. Sister-in-law's hair is straight and pretty dark too, but the baby's hair is lighter and a bit curly. At first, Dan just thought it was because of the baby's age. Sister-in-law kept playing it off and said that it would darken in time. But the baby's hair never got darker. I guess that was Dan's biggest clue. He confronted his wife with the DNA results in front of our parents. And she broke down sobbing that it was a mistake. Sister-in-law pulled out all the Darvo stops of denying, trickle-truthing and gaslighting. But Dan had none of it and actually had done more to find out about her affair than I would have ever thought. I knew he was smart. He just let himself be dumb. He had detailed proof of her cheating with phone records, texts he got off her phone, bank records, and the DNA test. He even identified the man she's cheating with, who is likely the father since he has much lighter colored curly hair. The evidence against her was crystal clear, and Dan said she was so bad at hiding her affair, he didn't even have a hard time figuring any of it out once he started looking. My parents demanded that my sister-in-law leave their house immediately. That's when she went psycho on them all. First in just yelling. But she quickly got physical. Police had to be called by my mother. And yeah, my sister-in-law was arrested. She scratched up Dan and my father quite a bit with her long fake nails, and even harmed her eldest kid in the crossfire by hitting him hard enough to give him a black eye and nosebleed when he tried to intervene. Dan was smart enough to have his phone recording nearby when he confronted her. So the police had all they needed to arrest her for assault. The sister-in-law's parents had to drive over to bail her out. Then they came back for the baby, sister-in-law's stuff, and her car as well. A couple of days after sister-in-law got bailed out, she showed up at my house because I was apparently next on her shit list. As soon as I opened the door, she went on a delusional rant where she called me out about posting on Reddit. Then said I was the entitled bane of her existence. I'm not sure, but I think she might have been high on something, because this felt extra crazy for her. And her eyes didn't look right. She claimed mothers with young children are the most sacred thing in the world. Then went on yelling that giving up my house shouldn't have been too much to ask for. Because supporting the family was the least I could have done. And if I had, then her family would still be together. When I tried to talk while she was spewing all that out, she actually attempted to shove me and cover my mouth. She even had her hand poised like she was ready to scratch me. Well, that went about as well with me as you can expect. I'm not exactly one to be threatened and told her I'd call the police if she didn't take her hands off me right that moment. I also told her I'd got it all on my doorbell camera. She started panicking the moment she heard camera. Then I ended up verbally savaging her to the point she was backing off my porch. I told her she had some gall to call me entitled when she's exactly that. She didn't work for anything she had anymore, cheated on her husband and got pregnant from her affair partner, made my mother do most of the parenting for her children, spent Dan's money till they were in a financial hole, and acted entitled to my home to the point of trying to steal it. I called her entitled X1000 and that she's a greedy bitch who is blinded by narcissism. Then I told her to stop blaming me for her own actions and to never show up at my house again. Being told all that was pretty much all sister-in-law needed to hear before jumping back into her car, then peeling out and speeding off. This was finally the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Now that she was separated from Dan, I ended up finally going to the police and filing a report on her for harassment and the assault she'd done on me last year, and her putting her hands on me at my front porch only added to it. The police have it all on record now. And I gave copies of the video to Dan for his divorce lawyer. And yes, I did file for a restraining order against sister-in-law. It was easily granted because it was obvious the woman is unhinged. She's not made a social media post about me since that I could see, but that's just because she put her profile on private. I hope her blame ship against me has long since sailed. Either way, she's left me alone. Sister-in-law was still with her affair partner during the divorce. At the time, I had no real idea of what kind of man he was. But any person who monkeys with someone else's spouse and even has a child with them, really doesn't have a lot of morals to begin with. Once the divorce was underway, sister-in-law admitted that Dan just wasn't man enough for her anymore because he couldn't afford to give her the lifestyle she wanted. She actually believed herself to be on the level of a trophy wife, and that she deserves to be with someone wealthy. Dan said he pulled a me and maniacally laughed at her. He said she was nowhere near hot enough to be a trophy wife, along with mentioning many other faults she had. Sister-in-law ended up humiliated by this and ran off like a child. Due to having to live with her parents, sister-in-law was forced to work in their family business because Dan wasn't giving her access to his bank accounts anymore. She'd already maxed out all the credit cards he previously gave her. And she griped about having to work for her parents despite having a college degree, but I think they were the only ones who'd employ her anyway since she's got a criminal record and a decade-long gap in her resume. I've heard from Dan that her parents were severely disappointed in her as well. But that was just a rumor. They could be just as bad as her for all I know. Either way, the shit show of a divorce really took off once it got going. Sister-in-law didn't walk away with much from it. Especially because she had an affair, physically hurt her father-in-law, husband, and eldest child. And it's an at-fault state, like I mentioned earlier. So she kissed any chance of getting her way goodbye. I'll go into detail about it in the final post. Update 6, October 9th, 2023. Fall 2023. This is what I know about the divorce from my brother Dan. Dan's lawyer pulled some strings to get the divorce started as fast as possible. But it cost him. I don't know the specific details or how much it all cost. They never told me. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, was financially backed into a corner very badly. And you know what can happen when you corner an animal. She fought back. But the law was not on her side, nor were her dwindling finances. Her parents had to pay for a lawyer for her. And not a very good one either. Also, she actually brought her affair partner to the divorce court to testify on her behalf. This guy was a real piece of work. He had a bronze tongue and a charming smile he tried to use to his advantage. He claimed my sister-in-law had been wronged by an incompetent husband, which is why she sought the arms of another man. He claimed he was ready to take responsibility for the child he had fathered with her. But that she would still be needing alimony to help support herself and care for said child. He remarked that because Dan at the time was still on the birth certificate, alimony should be one of his obligations. Dan said this guy used big words and a charming smile, but seemed an extra special kind of stupid. And coming from Dan, that's saying something. The judge was also not swayed in the slightest and told the bronze tongue out that he was a hypocrite for saying he was ready to take responsibility for his own child, while also holding his hand out for money from the man whose marriage he'd helped ruin. That shut him up. Dan was prepared to sue his wife's affair partner for alienation of affection too. However, that fell through. I guess it would have been on Dan to prove how much she'd loved him before the affair started. But after her mask came off and we saw the real her, we're not sure if she ever really loved him at all, or if she just loved having a meal ticket. Someone here pointed out my sister-in-law probably kept having kids to avoid getting a job. And you may have been right. Either way, she tried dragging out the divorce. But Dan's lawyer and the judge kept that from happening much. I swear, Dan must have seriously lucked out, because he got one of the meanest and most unsympathetic to cheaters judges in the state. And all the evidence we had on my sister-in-law made it easy to keep her from playing the victim. So instead she just let her real bitchy self out since there was no point in hiding it anymore. The court had all the records provided by Dan and myself, police reports, photos, and recordings to prove she was an abusive narcissist. There was a mountain against her that she had no way to climb over or hike around. She tried standing against the mountain. But that was prime avalanche territory. At the end of the divorce, my sister-in-law struck a deal to end things quickly. Dan takes 3/4 of the credit card debt, gets his name off the affair baby's birth certificate, and she walks away with only partial custody of her children, no alimony, but also without most of the credit debts she racked up. Her being legally employed by her parents meant she had an income of her own to fall back on to start paying off her debts. She can see her other kids almost whenever she wants and can take them on weekends. But for whatever reason, she has made very few attempts to even see them. She took them out to eat fast food a few times. But she never took them home with her. The kids are back in school now. So that gives her even fewer opportunities to see them. You'd think her parents would want to see their grandchildren. But they haven't contacted Dan about it. They barely saw Dan's children before that too. Now they may not even bother to see them at all. Do they hate kids or something? Even Dan doesn't know. But he tells me his in-laws were always indifferent to him. As for Dan, well, he really did love his wife a lot. So the betrayal of her cheating made him hit the bottle hard. Rewind back to the night of his confrontation with his wife. He came to me in a stupor with a whiskey bottle in hand, and his face all scratched up and covered in bandages. I wouldn't say he was drunk yet. But I freaked out seeing him looking like that at first, then berated him for driving under the influence. But that didn't really mean much to him compared to the betrayal of his cheating harlot of a soon-to-be ex-wife. We spent a few hours hanging out in my camper so as not to disturb my tenants. All the while Dan was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle and crying that he's a fool. And how he regretted ever marrying my sister-in-law. Pretty much any time he mentions her now, he just refers to her as that bitch. So that's ex-sister-in-law's nickname now. Ironically, this time together was the most bonding Dan and I have done in 15 years. While he didn't exactly apologize to me, he called himself a shitty human being with terrible taste in women. Then said I at least didn't make his mistakes. Despite all he previously did to me, he's still my younger brother. And I couldn't risk letting him try to drive home. So I told him to stay the night and managed to take his keys. Then set up the bunk in my camper for him to use. I rented out my spare rooms after all. He was in no shape to drive home. And if he'd taken an Uber, he'd have to pay for it, and then have to come back for his car later. He was still a depressed crying mess and didn't want our parents or his kids to see him like that. And frankly, I was worried he'd do something insanely stupid if I let him leave. I didn't want him to sleep in the house, so putting him in the camper was the best option. Just because that bitch screwed him over, doesn't mean I suddenly trusted him. So better for him to sleep it off in the camper. We both spent time in the camper playing games and watching movies on my portable DVD player. Poker was no fun with just two people, and Old Maid was just boring. Thankfully I had an UNO Deck 2 and an old-school battleship game. He really liked those. It was enough to keep him distracted until he was finally willing to lay down after running out of whiskey. He threw up a lot of it in a bucket anyway. But he was not opposed to sleeping in my camper. In fact, he found the idea kinda cool. Dan had a lot of questions for me about how I'd lived in the camper for as long as I did. And I answered them all, if not just to keep him busy. But I needed to go to bed myself since I had to be up early. So I left him with my portable DVD player and a couple of movies. That way he could amuse himself alone for a while if he even managed to stay awake. Before leaving for work in the morning, I popped in while Dan was passed out in the bunk and left a bottle of ibuprofen and an energy drink on the counter of the camper's kitchenette, along with his car keys and a letter explaining to leave through the backyard gate. He saw himself out without trouble around 1:30 p.m. About a month after ex-sister-in-law, aka that bitch, was kicked out. Dan came to me asking to borrow my camper. I guess he found it more comfortable than I'd thought when he slept in it. And he fully admitted he didn't ask sooner out of pride. But with his soon-to-be ex-wife out of the house, he'd decided to give up his room for his eldest kid. He's got 2 girls and a boy, with the boy being the eldest, and now 8 years old. The kids were all forced to share a room until that point. They just had curtains up for the boy's half of the room. But the boy often slept on the couch to avoid his sisters. I know the poor kid was really desperate for his own room. So I guess Dan decided to finally make a better decision as a dad, and came to see me in order to beg to borrow my camper so his son could have his room. If he could have afforded it, he'd have bought his own camper instead of relying on me. And even said as much. I hadn't even gotten the chance to use the camper for actual camping yet. But I caved and let him use it since it was actually for a good cause. And he promised to buy his own in time anyway. No, I didn't ask for rent money for the camper. Dan is in enough of a financial hole as it is right now. Ex-sister-in-law and the divorce drained him. And I've learned that I get far better results with family lately by not being spiteful. I loaded my camper up and put it down in my parents' backyard. And my father put in a 30-amp breaker so it'll have enough power for Dan to run heat and AC when he needs it. I do miss the camper. After all that time living in it, it kind of felt like it was a part of me. But the only reason I loaned it out was for the sake of Dan's kids. Pretty much the only reason I still do anything for my parents or Dan is for the sake of those kids, as I've bonded with them. And yes, I know I may not get the camper back for quite some time. And likely not in the kind of condition I lent it out in. But I've warned Dan and my parents that they will be financially responsible for any damage they do to the camper, as well as its upkeep for as long as they have it. I also took many time-stamped pictures and videos of the camper inside and outside before lending it out, so I can prove its condition before it leaves. Dan even recorded a video with me agreeing to my terms. So that's as good as a contract. With the financial drain of the divorce, Dan's not going to be able to get a place of his own for years, I'll bet. Though he seems to have no complaints about living in the camper at least. But I don't know if he actually likes it or if he's just putting up a front. But I can guess it reminds him of the backyard forts we had as kids, since that's how it felt with me sometimes. Either way, he's living in it now. I did get some major props from the extended family for letting him borrow it too. I'm now referred to by a lot of them as the good brother Dan doesn't deserve. Either way, I think getting rid of sister-in-law was a great first step in mending the family as a whole. I still have little care for my brother and parents after the way they treated me all my life, but I'm not gonna let Dan's kids suffer for it. Those kids have actually really warmed up to me. They're actually happy to see me when I come over, or when they visit me. I've even babysat a few times. Now that they don't have their mother's toxic influence around, they've become much nicer kids. Especially to me. I'm actually getting to enjoy being an uncle now. My mother is still doing the bulk of the parenting for my nieces and nephews, and she's been acting as nice as possible to stay on my good side. My father often looks very defeated in my presence, but otherwise, he's been either stoically quiet or just generally nice to me. But he won't talk to me much. Though that's leagues better than how he was before at least. I'm not letting my guard down either way. My parents do seem happier that my ex-sister-in-law is gone. And they often say they don't know what they ever saw in her. My mother especially, because the two of them butted heads over who was the mom in the house for a long time. Now for the last part. At the same time as the divorce, Dan sued to have his name removed from the birth certificate of the baby that wasn't his. That bitch didn't really want to change it because it meant no more child support from Dan if she did. However, there was a court-ordered paternity test for the man identified as the baby's father. I was prepared to laugh in case it turned out he wasn't the father either. But he was. Dan's lawyer had a long talk with ex-sister-in-law's lawyer. She had no leg to stand on, and Dan was ready to go to bat to make her situation even worse. She didn't have the finances to fight him any longer and agreed to change the birth certificate. The bronze-tongued lout who'd knocked her up did man up to take financial responsibility as a parent, but he ended up not staying with her. He contacted Dan through his lawyer to tell him he'd broken up with that bitch and that he wouldn't bother him again. I checked the social media of that guy after Dan linked me to it, and the lout was upset that now he's financially responsible for a child he never planned to have. And that he's too young for this. Guys, from what Dan's lawyer was able to find out, that man is just over 40. He looks younger than he is. But he's by no means a young man. Shortly after that, he put his online profile private. Ex-sister-in-law did the same with hers a long time prior. So I've no more information left to give. This may be the end. Ex-sister-in-law is out of our hair. My parents and brother have finally made a real effort to be better people. I'm surprisingly happy as an uncle, and my house is still my house. Update 7, October 24th, 2023. Ex-sister-in-law saw my posts. And is mad she can't do anything about them. No surprise my ex-sister-in-law saw my Reddit posts. She can't contact me about them in any way but with a lawyer thanks to my restraining order against her. And she likely can't afford to get a lawyer right now anyway since the divorce financially drained her too. So she complained to Dan about it and demanded he tell me to delete my Reddit account. But not only has Dan read my recent posts, he no longer cares. He said they serve as a reminder of the person he used to be. And he's not losing sleep about it. Besides, I've still helped him out despite all he's done to me. So he's not gonna be upset about it. My parents have also made sure to try and treat Dan and me more equally when I'm around too. My father is still a man of few words around me though. Someone pointed out that changing now after so long of treating me as the opposite of Dan means he doesn't know how to connect with me anymore. And I think they're right. I don't mind the way he is now though. My mother has also developed a habit of saying she's sorry about every little thing in my presence. Dan told me that she and my father have been reprimanded a lot by extended family and their counselor, and now my mother feels like she needs to apologize for everything. This is all a stark contrast to how they used to treat me. Also, I didn't talk about before what ex-sister-in-law's opinion was on Dan borrowing my camper so his son could have his and ex-sister-in-law's old bedroom. Well, like a stereotypical bully she looked down on him and mocked him about it because now he's living like a bum as she put it. But Dan took it all in stride and asked if she was done yet, because he knew this was exactly how she'd react. And he just plain doesn't care anymore. She's borderline dead to him, and her insults were on deaf ears. Then he pointed out to her that he was living out of the camper because he was putting his kids ahead of himself so his son could have his own room. Something his ex never did, despite being their mother. She just weaponized her children and pregnancy to keep from working and to emotionally blackmail everyone. Then he asked her to remind him how that was working out for her. Mind you, this was early on in their divorce. I'm sure you can all guess her reaction. Dan said his ex did have quite the tantrum about my recent posts. But no one has bothered to contact me on her behalf to take them down. So she just has to live with the well-deserved shame. She has been trying to act nicer to Dan lately. Guess the grass isn't so green living with her parents. Dan tolerates her as the mother of his children whenever they meet, but nothing more. He will never take her back. He's told me that he can never look at her like he used to. And the very thought of her turns him off emotionally. So ex-sister-in-law pretty much has no chance of reconciliation. I have no new info on ex-sister-in-law's affair partner. His social media is still locked down. Same with ex-sister-in-laws. And it's likely to remain that way as long as I have a chance to read them. Update 8, November 5th, 2023. My truck got egged on Halloween. Happened in the middle of the night, very early morning on the 1st. I suspect it was my ex-sister-in-law. But the person my cameras recorded was wearing layers of heavy sweats and had their face wrapped up along with big glasses covering the eyes. You could not really tell if they were a man or woman. They came on foot too, so no identifying a car. They did look at the ex-sister-in-law's height though. But that is not much in the way of evidence on its own. If it was ex-sister-in-law, she knew about my cameras. So covering her face and body for petty eggy revenge was probably the smartest thing she's done in years. Way to finally put her college degree to use. By egging a beat-up old pickup truck. The egger showed up around 3 a.m. I was deep asleep and did not hear anything. Whoever it was that appeared that night quickly threw a dozen eggs or so, all over my truck. They did not attempt to do any more damage at least, and were gone in a flash as soon as the last egg was thrown. I did not see the mess till I was leaving for work in the morning. I ran my truck through a local car wash during my lunch break. That took most of the egg off. Had to scrub it a bit more later after work. Egg really are not good for the paint. But the truck is from the 90s, and does not exactly look mint anyway. I did take photos and filed a police report with the CCTV footage as evidence, but so far nothing has come of it. There was no real damage other than my minor irritation and $15 at a car wash. If ex-sister-in-law did do this, then she was smart enough to only throw eggs and not key my paint or slash my tires. So my insurance would not be involved. I do not think much will come of the police report as the cops seem to dismiss it as a probable prank by a teenager. I get they were probably overworked, but at least the report will keep a paper trail in case of future incidents. I waited till now to post because I wondered if anything else would happen. But no. Just right back to peace and quiet. I would appreciate any good advice on the matter though. Just in case something like this happens again. Update. Asked around with some people on the street about cameras possibly seeing the person who egged my car. I got responses ranging from, "We do not have cameras," to "It was Halloween and people pulled stupid pranks. Let it go." The few people who were helpful told me that I waited way too long to ask, and the footage auto-deleted. So basically the egger got away. But if it was ex-sister-in-law, I am guessing she had to walk around a half-mile in those sweats just to not get her car spotted on camera or something. It would not surprise me if she questioned if it was even worth the effort. Oh well, I guess I'll just wait and see if the egger comes back next year. I did hand out printed pictures of the egger though. And even stapled a few up on posts. So now people in my neighborhood are aware at least. The tenants renting out 2 rooms in my house have stayed out of it, and I do not really blame them. It's not their problem. New update. Dan returned my camper and ex-sister-in-law got a driving under the influence. But I've also got a copycat that has made my family upset all over again. June 25th, 2024. To start this off. I came back after all this time to find 500 messages in my inbox and 130 unanswered PMs. Please don't PM me anymore. There's just too many to answer. So if you PM'd me and I clicked ignore, I'm sorry. Just know that's why. It was not personal. I just felt too overwhelmed to reply to so many. But that's not what brought me back to Reddit. I decided to stay away at least a year because my posts were not exactly boosting family morale. So I didn't log in for quite some time. But then the other day my brother Dan spotted a video with an unbelievably similar to mine in far too many ways. Only it was about an OP with a twin sister instead of a sister-in-law. But it had so much of the same. Entitled Narcissistic Parents, Guy treated like shit all his life and then rendered homeless, golden child sibling, keeping the favoritism a closely guarded secret from family while the OP was growing up. Sister still in her 20s has 3 kids and was pregnant with a 4th. Sister's eldest son attacks OP, and above all them trying to steal the OP's house by breaking in while he wasn't home. So many parts were nearly identical. Even 2 lines like, "Suck it up" and "My house is not up for grabs" were in the video. My parents and brother are frankly pissed, and I wasn't happy seeing the video either. We've all been trying hard to get past our previous family dynamic and what ex-sister-in-law put us all through. You can imagine it took a lot for me to let go of my grudges. But in a year my parents and Dan have improved more than I'd seen in my entire life before that. And I love me nibblings to pieces. So whoever wrote that copycat story, congratulations, you just sent my entire family right back into needing therapy. And yes, my family is aware I'm making this post. Now with that rant over, here's what I hope to be my final update. Now for what was stated in the title. I had a few naysayers before. But Dan kept his word. My camper was returned to me a few months ago and in good condition. Dan took good care of it and thoroughly cleaned it before giving it back. He and our father also resealed the roof on it once while it was in their care. Inside it's no worse for wear than it was when I was living in it. Only I got it back smelling like pine cleaner. There was some minor drama while Dan was living in my camper from a neighbor right behind them. Not quite sure she qualifies as a Karen. But she was close enough. She started yelling at them from over the fence about the camper. And started threatening the police. My brother and father went off on her, and then explained Dan was living in the camper so his son could have his bedroom. Well, the neighbor still wasn't happy, but stopped with the threats. My father talked to her husband later though, and he was bull mad at her. Then he apologized on her behalf, and said Dan was doing a good thing by giving up his room to his son. The neighbor husband also congratulated Dan on kicking out ex-sister-in-law, and said he was always afraid to mention it before, but she was just a horrid woman. We can all agree on that now. So yeah, the neighbors aren't a problem anymore. Dan and our father managed to get some money together on the side, and bought a slightly bigger camper to set up in our parents' backyard. We needed my truck just to move it. But we got it in there. It's basically the best Dan can do right now till the credit debts his ex piled up are paid off. And even then, he's got the future of his kids to plan for. He may be living in that camper for the next 10 years. But it's preferable to how it was when he was married. His ex-wife certainly can't and won't be contributing to college funds for the kids. Except maybe for her affair baby. Dan's camper is admittedly better than mine, and it's newer, bigger, and has its own bathroom. Mine does not. Although Dan never really uses said bathroom. It's basically become a closet since the toilet and shower are so tiny. If he needs to take a leak or something, he just goes in the house. Dan and I had a joking laugh about me being jealous he's got the better hobo house. And we bantered like sarcastic gentlemen about it. He's kitted out his camper with some better amenities. Like a flat-screen TV complete with streaming, video games and DVD. He said it feels like he really has his own place now. Even though he's just in the backyard. And he's much happier now that he's divorced. Dan tells me one day he'll get a truck too, just so he can move the camper on his own someday. But for now he's sticking with his minivan for the sake of his kids. So his camper is sitting pretty where it is, and mine is back in my backyard where it belongs. Though it's not gone unused. I temporarily rented it to a cousin who moved into the area for work. And they were only in the camper for about a month before finding their own apartment. Other than that, it serves as a guest house when needed. Relatives come by to use it when in town so as to not need a motel. My nephew has come over to stay in it a few times for fun as well. His sisters don't really have an interest. The camper is the closest he's ever been to camping. Same here sadly, because I didn't buy that camper to camp, but to live. As for my parents, they've gotten therapy. My mother got medicated for her mental problems and fully acknowledges her terrible past mistakes as a parent with all of the favoritism, as does my father. My father is still awkward around me, but he's been fairly active in his church and is working hard to rebuild the family reputation as best he can. And Dan has cut back on drinking a lot since he isn't so stressed out anymore. He's even taken up exercising. He's in pretty good shape now. And he told me his ex-wife saw the picture of him he posted online after shedding 20 pounds and called him to compliment. He didn't take the bait. As for the holidays, my parents, brother and nibblings all came to my Christmas Eve party last year, along with most of the other relatives who came the year prior. No problems at all, save for the fact none of them could stay the night in my spare rooms anymore since I rented them out. Both of my tenants were away seeing their own families too. Things went swimmingly. Not only was ex-sister-in-law not invited, she wouldn't have been able to crash the party anyway because of my restraining order against her. But she also barely made any attempt to spend time with her other kids either. She only bothered to see them twice a month at best. She didn't even send them any gifts for Christmas or birthdays since being outed as a cheater. And the kids were initially pretty upset about that. But now they just don't care. Ex-sister-in-law I guess decided she was gonna try to live like she was single again, despite having a baby at home. And it didn't go well because life gave her one hell of a cheese slap. On New Year's, ex-sister-in-law went out late to party like it was 1999, and she got pulled over by a cop on her way home. She got arrested for DUI, and her car was impounded. She called Dan while being arrested, begging him to come get her car to keep it from going to impound. He told her he was not helping her, and she could deal with it herself. Dan has drunk and drove, so it was kinda little hypocritical. But this woman put him through so much, I don't blame him for rebuffing her. Some flying monkeys of ex-sister-in-laws called Dan to berate him for being a terrible person. Pretty sure this was the same woman who called me a while back. Dan had none of her shit, and went off on her with a long tirade about his ex's cheating. What happened in the divorce, and that he has no sympathy for his ex since she left him with mounds of credit card debt and she does nothing for their kids anymore. The flying monkey didn't call back. We still don't know who she was. But Dan said she sounded like a religious nut. Ex-sister-in-law went to court, and she pleaded guilty for the DUI. Dan found this out because she called him claiming that because of the DUI, she wouldn't be seeing her other kids anytime soon. She told him she was sentenced to take a 6-month DUI class, in which time her license is suspended until completion. And she won't be allowed to drink at all. Which is the part she was most upset about. I've heard of these classes before. They make you take regular and at times random urine tests, and when you finally get your license back, you have to have a camera and breathalyzer installed in your car for a year. Also increased insurance rates for the DUI on record. Ex-sister-in-law has not been having a fun time. But I have no pity for her. I don't drink and drive. Sadly, that's all the info I have on ex-sister-in-law, as she's kept minimal contact with Dan for some time now. And eventually, she'll probably stop contacting him altogether unless absolutely necessary. I don't know anything else about sister-in-law's parents, or her affair baby. Even Dan doesn't know. But I do still have a bit of info on someone else. Remember ex-sister-in-law's affair partner, the bronze-tongued lout? Well, he made his social media public again. And he doesn't seem to acknowledge the existence of ex-sister-in-law or his child at all. Dan tried to message him, and promptly got an immediate block. So the guy is just being an ass and acting like his shit doesn't stink. Whatever. His knocking up ex-sister-in-law got her out of the family anyway. So in a way, we're all thankful to that AP bastard. That's everything I have. And hopefully won't need to come back again. Unless my truck gets egged again next Halloween. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. I've silently followed your stories from the start. I'm happy to see how things have progressed since. While I know it's a long road until things are fully repaired, if ever, I am glad your parents have acknowledged what they did and are actively trying to fix it. Dan has stepped up and now you two can even banter, and the fact the kids enjoy you is wonderful. Honestly, I'm happiest to hear about your bond with the Nibblings. The fact that your nephew wants to come over to their uncle's house to camp is just wonderful. I hope Exil either wakes the hell up and shapes up for the kids, or she stays the hell away. Anyways, hopefully, the future is less drama and more happy times. Hopefully, I will not see a post from you again. And I mean that with the best of intentions. Commenter 2, this is as wholesome an ending as it can get. It's good to see a family dynamic being repaired. Kudos to your parents for doing the necessary work to realize how much damage they caused and to your brother for getting his life back on track. Commenter 3. I'm sorry your drama saga ended up being copied for entertainment. However, I am glad that things are improving for you, your parents, your brother, and your Nibblings. It sounds like the toxicity was your ex-Sil and it shows because with her gone life has gotten better for the rest of you. I feel sorry for all of the kids, but they might be better off in the future without her. Thank you for this update, which is hopefully the final one. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.